A Debt Repaid.
France, 1918.
Geneviève Lefebvre found an intricately designed medallion beneath rubble that pulsed with a faint glow, engraved with in memory of Captain Julien Moreau, evoking lost honor. Chapter 1. A Whisper in the Ruins. The air hung thick with the scent of damp earth and the lingering ghosts of smoke. Geneviève Lefebvre, her hands raw and chapped, carefully sifted through the rubble of what had once been the village bakery. It was a ritual, this painstaking search, born not of hope but of a stubborn refusal to let the war steal everything. The German offensive had swept through their small village of Verrières like a cruel wind, leaving behind a skeletal landscape of shattered homes and broken lives. The vibrant hues of life had been replaced by shades of gray and brown, the colors of dust and despair. Geneviève, at 58, was no stranger to loss. The war had already claimed her husband, Pierre, 2 years prior, his name added to the ever-growing list etched onto the cold stone of the village memorial. Her son, Jean-Luc, was somewhere on the Western Front, his infrequent letters treasured possessions, read and reread until the paper threatened to disintegrate. But Verrières, her home, held the threads of her life, woven into the very stones that now lay scattered around her. She refused to abandon it, even as many others had fled to the relative safety of the South. The sun, a pale disk behind the perpetual haze of smoke, cast long, mournful shadows across the ravaged landscape. Geneviève paused, her back aching, her eyes tracing the familiar outline of the church steeple, now miraculously, almost defiantly, intact. It stood as a stark contrast to the devastation surrounding it, a silent testament to faith, or perhaps sheer, dumb luck. She adjusted the worn woolen shawl around her shoulders, a futile attempt to ward off the persistent chill that seemed to seep into her very bones. The shawl had been a gift from Pierre, years ago, a vibrant splash of crimson against the somber backdrop of her widow's garb. She touched it now, the familiar texture a small comfort in a world that had become increasingly unfamiliar. Her fingers brushed against something hard and metallic beneath a pile of shattered roof tiles. Curiosity, a rare flicker in these bleak days, prompted her to dig deeper. The object was small, circular, and surprisingly heavy. She pulled it free, turning it over in her gloved hands. It was a medallion, intricately crafted, its surface covered in a delicate filigree of intertwined leaves and flowers. It was silver, though tarnished with age and dirt, but it was the center of the medallion that caught her attention. A faint, almost imperceptible glow emanated from within, a soft, pulsating light that seemed to defy the encroaching gloom. Geneviève held her breath, a strange shiver running down her spine. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. The glow was not the harsh glare of a lamp, but something softer, gentler, as if the medallion held a tiny, captive star. She rubbed at the surface with her thumb, revealing an inscription beneath the grime. The letters were elegantly etched, worn but still legible, in memory of Captain Julien Moreau. The name stirred nothing in her memory. She knew most of the families in Verrières and the surrounding villages, but Moreau was unfamiliar. Perhaps he had been an officer passing through, a casualty of the relentless fighting that had scarred this land. The war had brought so many strangers, so much sorrow, to their doorstep. She turned the medallion over again, studying the intricate design. It was a work of art, clearly crafted with love and care. Who was this Captain Moreau? And why did his medallion emit this strange, ethereal light? It felt warm to the touch, almost alive, as if it held a secret, a whisper from the past waiting to be heard. A sudden gust of wind whipped through the ruins, scattering dust and debris. Geneviève clutched the medallion tighter, a sudden, inexplicable sense of protectiveness washing over her. She felt a pull, a connection to this unknown soldier and the object that bore his name. It was more than just curiosity, it was a feeling of recognition, as if she were meant to find this, meant to unravel its mystery. The distant rumble of artillery fire echoed across the valley, a grim reminder of the war that continued to rage just beyond the horizon. Genevieve knew she should seek shelter, return to the relative safety of her small, partially damaged cottage. But she hesitated, her gaze fixed on the glowing medallion. It felt like a lifeline, a flicker of hope in the overwhelming darkness. A promise, perhaps, of something more than just survival. She looked at the sky, at its gray-filled clouds. Today will be a day for answers, she thought. She had been living day by day, enduring each moment and just trying to survive. But this felt different. With a newfound determination, she slipped the medallion into the pocket of her apron, its warmth a comforting presence against her thigh. She would find out who Captain Julian Moreau was. She would uncover the secret of the enchanted medallion. And perhaps, in doing so, she would find a way to reclaim a piece of the life that the war had stolen from her. She turned toward the direction of the village church, the faint glow of the medallion a guiding light in the gathering dusk. She had a feeling the answers to the secrets would begin within the church, with old Father Michel. He'd been the town's priest, historian, and keeper of secrets. If anyone knew anything, it was him. Chapter 2. The Medallion's Glow. The heavy oak door of the church creaked open with a mournful groan, the sound echoing through the vast, mostly empty space. Dust motes danced in the shafts of weak sunlight that filtered through the stained glass windows, illuminating the chipped and faded depictions of saints and angels. Many of the windows had been damaged, boarded up with rough planks, but enough remained to cast a kaleidoscope of muted colors across the stone floor. Genevieve stepped inside, the sudden coolness a stark contrast to the lingering warmth of the day outside, despite the ruined state of the village. The air was thick with the scent of incense and old stone, a familiar and comforting aroma that had always been a source of solace for Genevieve. The church, like her, had borne the brunt of the war's fury, but it still stood, a testament to resilience and faith. The pews were mostly empty, many having been used for firewood or makeshift repairs, but a few remained, scarred but intact. Father Michel, a small, wiry man with a gentle face framed by a fringe of white hair, was kneeling before the altar, his head bowed in prayer. He was a constant in barriers, a shepherd tending to his dwindling flock. He'd been there to marry Genevieve and Pierre, to baptize Jean-Luc, and to offer comfort when Pierre had been taken by the war. He was a part of the fabric of their lives, a source of wisdom and strength in times of trouble. Genevieve approached him quietly, her footsteps echoing softly on the stone floor. She didn't want to disturb his prayers, but she felt a growing urgency, a need to share her discovery and seek his guidance. The medallion felt heavy in her pocket, a tangible weight that mirrored the burden of its mystery. He must have sensed her presence, for he slowly raised his head and turned, a faint smile gracing his lips. "Genevieve," he said, his voice a soft, raspy whisper. "Come in, child. What brings you to this house of God on this somber day?" "Father," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "I found something strange. In the ruins of the bakery." She reached into her pocket and drew out the medallion, holding it out to him. The faint glow seemed to intensify in the dim light of the church, casting a soft, ethereal light on their faces. Father Michel's eyes widened, his smile fading as he took the medallion in his trembling hands. He turned it over and over, his fingers tracing the intricate design, his gaze fixed on the glowing center. "Where did you say you found this?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Beneath a pile of roof tiles," Genevieve replied. "It was buried, as if hidden." Father Michel looked at the inscription. Then he looked up and met her gaze. The look of surprised recognition was clear. He continued to stare at it, lost in thought, his brow furrowed in concentration. He muttered something under his breath, a prayer perhaps, or an incantation. The air around them seemed to shimmer, the silence broken only by the distant rumble of artillery fire, a constant reminder of the war that raged just beyond the walls of the church. "Captain Julian Moreau," he finally said, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and sadness. "I haven't heard that name in years. Decades, even. Do you know him, Father?" Genevieve asked, her heart pounding with anticipation. "I knew of him," Father Michel corrected. He was a legend of sorts.
A hero, some would say.
He was from a noble family, the Moreau family, who owned a large estate just north of here, before the war. The Chateau Moreau. He gestured vaguely towards the north, his eyes clouded with memory. He was a brilliant young man, destined for great things.
Un scholar, un poète, un soldier.
He was also different. Different?
How?
He was said to possess certain gifts, Father Michel said, his voice hesitant. Abilities that were unusual. He was fascinated by ancient lore, by the mystical and the unexplained. He was a seeker of knowledge, a believer in things that most people dismissed as mere superstition. He handed the medallion back to Genevieve, his hand trembling slightly. This medallion, it was his. I remember him showing it to me once many years ago. He said it was a family heirloom, passed down through generations. He claimed it had powers. Powers? Genevieve repeated, her voice barely a whisper. What kind of powers? Father Michel hesitated, his gaze shifting towards the stained glass windows, as if seeking guidance from the silent figures depicted there. He never told me the specifics, he said.
He was always secretive about it.
But he said it was a source of protection. A talisman, of sorts. He believed it could ward off evil, heal the sick, and even glimpse the future. Genevieve looked down at the medallion in her hand, her mind reeling. It was more than just a beautiful piece of jewelry, it was a relic, a connection to a forgotten past, a window into a world of mystery and magic. But it was also a reminder of loss, of a life cut short by the war. He died, didn't he? She asked softly. Captain Moreau? Father Michel nodded, his eyes filled with sadness.
Yes.
He was killed in action, early in the war. 1914, one of the first to fall. His body was never recovered. It was said he disappeared during a particularly fierce battle, vanished without a trace. The chateau was abandoned, fell into ruin. His family scattered. A silence fell between them, broken only by the crackling of a candle on the altar. The weight of history, of loss and sacrifice, pressed down on them. Genevieve felt a pang of sorrow for this unknown soldier, this Captain Moreau, whose life had been so tragically cut short. She wondered what he would have thought if he knew his precious medallion had ended up in her hands, buried beneath the rubble of a war-torn village. The light from the medallion was the only source of brightness, save for the candle, in their dim corner of the church. She felt a deep tugging at her heart. She needed to know more. Father, she said, her voice filled with a newfound determination. I need to know more about him. About Captain Moreau. About this medallion.
Can you help me?
Father Michel looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of compassion and concern. He knew the dangers of delving into the past, of stirring up forgotten memories and secrets. But he also saw the spark of hope in her eyes, the same spark that had kept him going through these dark times. He had been a passive part of the war, until now. Perhaps this was not just her calling. Perhaps it was his, too. I will tell you what I know, he said, his voice firm. But be warned, Genevieve. Some secrets are best left buried. The past can be a dangerous place. And this medallion, it may hold more power than you realize. He paused and looked down at his weathered hands. But it chose you. And you chose to bring it here. There are no coincidences in war, Genevieve. And I suspect there are no coincidences, even with old magic. He looked deeply into her eyes, his look unwavering. We begin tomorrow. Meet me here, at first light. Chapter 3. Echoes of Captain Moreau. The first rays of dawn, pale and hesitant, crept through the damaged, stained glass windows of the church, painting the stone floor with fractured colors. Genevieve arrived before the sun had fully risen, the medallion tucked securely in her pocket, its faint warmth a constant reassurance. The air was crisp and cold, carrying the scent of wood smoke from the few remaining hearths in the village. She found Father Michel already waiting, not at the altar this time, but in a small, cluttered room behind the sacristy. It was a room she had never seen before, a hidden chamber filled with ancient books, dusty scrolls, and forgotten relics. The walls were lined with shelves reaching to the high, vaulted ceiling, crammed with volumes bound in leather and parchment. The air was thick with the scent of aging paper and beeswax, a smell that spoke of centuries of accumulated knowledge and secrets. This must be where he keeps the true history of Verriers, she thought. Not just the dates and names, but the stories, the whispers, the things that were never written in the official records. Father Michel was seated at a large, wooden table, a single candle illuminating a thick, leather-bound book. He looked up as she entered, a faint smile gracing his lips. "You're punctual, Genevieve," he said, his voice a soft rasp. "I appreciate that. Time is a precious commodity, especially in these days." He gestured towards a small, wooden stool opposite him. "Sit down, child. We have much to discuss." Genevieve sat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She felt a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. She was eager to learn more about Captain Moreau, but she was also aware of Father Michel's warning, the sense that she was treading on dangerous ground. "I've been doing some research," Father Michel began, his fingers tracing the faded gold lettering on the cover of the book. "This is the Moreau family chronicle. It dates back centuries, to the very founding of Verriers. It contains the history of the family, their triumphs, their tragedies, their secrets." He opened the book carefully, the brittle pages crackling softly. The script was elegant but archaic, difficult to decipher. Genevieve leaned closer, trying to make sense of the words, but it was like looking at a foreign language. "The Moreau family were always different," Father Michel continued, his voice low and thoughtful. "They were known for their eccentricities, their fascination with the occult, the esoteric, the things that lay beyond the realm of conventional understanding. They were scholars, mystics, and some say, even sorcerers." He pointed to a passage in the book, his finger tracing the words. "This section speaks of Captain Julien Moreau's great-grandfather, Antoine Moreau. He was a renowned alchemist, said to have possessed the secret of the Philosopher's Stone, the ability to transmute base metals into gold." Genevieve's eyes widened. "Is it true?" she asked. "Could he really do that?" Father Michel shrugged. "Who knows? Legends often grow with time. But there's no doubt that Antoine Moreau was a brilliant man, a master of chemistry and ancient lore. He built a laboratory in the chateau, a hidden chamber where he conducted his experiments. It was said to be filled with strange devices, arcane texts, and magical artifacts." He turned a few pages, his finger stopping at another passage. "This speaks of Julien's grandfather, Jean-Luc Moreau." Genevieve inwardly started at the sound of her son's name. He was a renowned astronomer, obsessed with the stars and their influence on human destiny. He built an observatory on the roof of the chateau, where he spent countless nights charting the heavens. He believed that the stars held the key to unlocking the secrets of the universe. "And Captain Moreau?" Genevieve asked, her voice filled with a growing sense of wonder. "What does it say about him?" Father Michel paused, his gaze shifting towards the medallion that lay nestled in Genevieve's pocket. "Julien inherited his ancestors' fascination with the mystical," he said. "But he was also a man of action, a soldier. He believed that magic and science were not mutually exclusive, but rather two sides of the same coin. He sought to combine them, to harness the power of the unseen world for the benefit of mankind." He pointed to a portrait in the book, a faded image of a young man in military uniform. It was Captain Julien Moreau. He had a handsome face, with piercing blue eyes and a determined chin. He looked both intelligent and compassionate, a man of strength and sensitivity. Genevieve felt a pang of sorrow, a sense of loss for a life that had been so tragically cut short. He was particularly interested in the power of symbols, Father Michel continued. He believed that certain symbols, when properly crafted and imbued with the right intention, could act as conduits for energy, for magic. He closed the book gently, his gaze meeting Genevieve's. "The medallion," he said. "It's more than just a family heirloom. It's a symbol, a key, a gateway. It's a testament to his belief in the power of the unseen world." "But what does it do?" Genevieve asked, her voice a whisper. "What is its purpose?" Father Michel hesitated. "I'm not entirely sure," he admitted. Julian was always secretive about it. But I believe it's connected to his research, to his attempts to bridge the gap between the physical and the spiritual. It may be a source of protection, a tool for healing, or something else entirely. Something more powerful, more dangerous. He paused, his brow furrowed in thought. There were rumors, he continued, his voice low. Whispers of a secret project, something Julian was working on before he was deployed. Something to do with the war, with finding a way to end the bloodshed. It was said he was close to a breakthrough, that he had discovered a way to harness the power of the medallion for a greater purpose. And what was that purpose? I don't know. The details were never revealed. But I believe it was something extraordinary. Something that could have changed the course of the war, perhaps even the course of history. He looked at her intensely. He was a good man, Genevieve. He wanted, more than anything, to bring peace back to France. To his home. Genevieve felt a shiver run down her spine. She was holding a piece of history, a relic of a forgotten dream. A dream of peace, of a world without war, a world where magic and science could coexist. But it was also a burden, a responsibility. She had been chosen, somehow, to carry on this legacy, to uncover the truth about Captain Moreau and his enchanted medallion. "What do we do now, Father?" she asked, her voice filled with a mixture of fear and determination. Father Michel smiled, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "We continue our search," he said. "We delve deeper into the past, into the secrets of the Moreau family. We follow the clues, wherever they may lead. And we pray that we are strong enough to face whatever we may find." He reached out and placed his hand over hers, his touch warm and reassuring. "We're in this together, Genevieve," he said. "You and I. We are the keepers of the flame, the guardians of the past. And perhaps with a little faith and a little magic, we can find a way to bring light back into this darkened world." "The chateau," Genevieve suddenly stated, looking determined. "We must go to the Chateau Moreau." Father Michel's eyes widened in alarm. Chapter 4. The Nurse's Secret. Father Michel's initial reaction was one of stark refusal. "The chateau? Absolutely not, Genevieve. It's far too dangerous. It's been abandoned for years, and it's likely crawling with looters, deserters, or worse, German patrols." Genevieve, however, was resolute. The image of Captain Moreau's portrait, his intelligent and compassionate eyes, was etched in her mind. She felt a growing conviction that the chateau held the key to unlocking the medallion secrets, and perhaps to finding some measure of peace in her own war-torn heart. "Father," she said, her voice firm but gentle, "we've come this far. We can't turn back now. The medallion, it led me to you, to the Moreau family chronicle. It's pointing us towards the chateau. We have to follow where it leads." He sighed, his shoulders slumping in resignation. He knew she was right. He, too, felt the pull of the medallion, the sense of a destiny unfolding. He was an old man, his days of adventure long behind him, but he couldn't deny the call of this mystery, the chance to play a part in something larger than himself. "All right," he conceded, his voice heavy with reluctance. "But we go carefully. We go under the cover of darkness. And we stay together. No unnecessary risks." They spent the rest of the day preparing, gathering supplies, and making plans. Father Michel, despite his age, possessed a surprising knowledge of the local terrain, of hidden paths and forgotten trails. He drew a rough map, marking the safest route to the chateau, avoiding the main roads and the areas most likely to be patrolled by soldiers. As dusk settled, they set off, two unlikely figures venturing into the heart of a war-torn landscape. Genevieve carried a small satchel containing food, water, and a few basic medical supplies, remnants of her days assisting the village doctor before the war had consumed everything. Father Michel carried a lantern, its light shielded to avoid detection, and a worn leather-bound Bible, his constant companion. The journey was arduous, the terrain rough and uneven. They navigated through dense forests, across overgrown fields, and along the banks of a muddy stream. The air was filled with the sounds of the night, the rustling of leaves, the hooting of owls, and the ever-present, distant rumble of artillery fire, a constant reminder of the war that raged just beyond their reach. Genevieve, despite her age and the hardships she had endured, found a renewed strength within her. The medallion, tucked securely in her pocket, seemed to radiate a warmth that seeped into her very bones, bolstering her courage and determination. She felt a connection to Captain Moreau, a sense of shared purpose, as if she were walking in his footsteps, carrying on his unfinished mission. They reached the outskirts of the chateau grounds just before midnight. The moon, a sliver of silver in the inky sky, cast long, eerie shadows across the overgrown landscape. The chateau itself was a looming silhouette against the horizon, a dark, forbidding presence that seemed to exude an aura of sadness and decay. "We'll approach from the east," Father Michel whispered, his voice barely audible above the rustling of the wind. "There's an old service entrance, a hidden door that leads into the kitchens. It's less likely to be guarded." They crept through the overgrown gardens, their hearts pounding in their chests. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying vegetation, a smell that spoke of neglect and abandonment. The once manicured lawns were now a tangled mess of weeds and wildflowers, the fountains and statues crumbling and covered in moss. They reached the eastern wall of the chateau, their eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. Father Michel located the hidden door, concealed behind a thick curtain of ivy. It was made of heavy oak, reinforced with iron bands, but it was unlocked, the hinges rusted and creaking. He pushed the door open slowly, the sound echoing in the stillness of the night. They stepped inside, their senses on high alert. The kitchens were dark and cavernous, filled with the ghostly shapes of abandoned furniture and cooking utensils. Dust motes danced in the faint moonlight that filtered through the grimy windows, illuminating a scene of frozen decay. As they moved deeper into the chateau, a faint sound reached their ears. A soft, rhythmic tapping coming from somewhere above them. They froze, listening intently. It sounded like typing. "Someone's here," Genevieve whispered, her hand instinctively reaching for the medallion in her pocket. Father Michel nodded, his eyes wide with alarm. He extinguished the lantern, plunging them into near total darkness. "Stay close," he whispered.
And be quiet."
They crept towards the sound, their footsteps muffled by the thick layer of dust on the floor. The tapping grew louder as they approached a narrow staircase leading to the upper levels of the chateau. They ascended slowly, their hearts pounding in their chests, their senses straining to detect any sign of danger. The tapping was coming from a room at the end of a long, dark corridor. A faint sliver of light emanated from beneath the door. Father Michel gestured for Genevieve to stay back, and he cautiously approached the door, his ear pressed against the wood. He listened for a moment, his brow furrowed in concentration. Then, he slowly turned the doorknob and pushed the door open, revealing a scene that made them both gasp. The room was small and sparsely furnished, but it was clean and tidy, a stark contrast to the rest of the chateau. A single oil lamp illuminated a young woman seated at a small desk, her fingers flying across the keys of an old typewriter. She was dressed in a nurse's uniform, her hair pulled back in a neat bun. She was so engrossed in her work that she didn't notice them at first. Father Michel cleared his throat, and the woman startled, whirling around in her chair. Her eyes widened in surprise, and then, in fear.
"Who are you?"
she asked, her voice trembling. "What are you doing here?" "We mean you no harm," Father Michel said, his voice calm and reassuring. "We're just looking for something." "This is private property," the woman said, her voice regaining some of its composure. "You shouldn't be here. It's dangerous." "We know," Genevieve said, stepping forward. "But we need your help. We're looking for information about Captain Julian Moreau." The woman's eyes widened again, this time with a mixture of surprise and recognition. She stared at Genevieve, her gaze fixed on the faint outline of the medallion beneath her apron. A name escaped her lips, a whisper lost to the shadows and secrets. "Madeleine," Father Michel breathed. She seemed to deflate at that, and she slowly stood, stepping to the window. He saved my life, the nurse began, her voice cracking. Chapter 5. Letters from the Front. The nurse, Madeline, turned from the window, her silhouette framed by the faint moonlight. Her face, though young, was etched with the weariness of someone who had seen too much suffering, too much death. She was perhaps in her late 20s, with dark hair and intelligent, compassionate eyes that mirrored the description Genevieve had seen of Captain Moreau, though hers were a deep, soulful brown. "He saved my life," she repeated, her voice stronger now, but still tinged with a lingering tremor. "During the Battle of the Marne. I was just a volunteer then, barely trained. We were overwhelmed, the wounded pouring in faster than we could treat them. I was about to be overrun, caught in the crossfire." She paused, her gaze drifting towards the window, as if reliving the horrors of that day. "He appeared out of nowhere, like an angel of mercy. He pulled me to safety, shielded me from the bullets. He was wounded himself, but he didn't hesitate. He risked his own life to save mine." Genevieve felt a pang of empathy for this young woman, a kindred spirit who had also been touched by the war's cruelty. She understood the bond, the unspoken connection that formed between those who had shared such experiences, the gratitude that transcended words. "We're not here to harm you, Madeline," Genevieve said, her voice soft and reassuring. "We're here to learn more about Captain Moreau. We found something that belonged to him." She reached into her pocket and drew out the medallion, holding it out to Madeline. The nurse's eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat. She reached out a trembling hand and touched the medallion, her fingers tracing the intricate design, her gaze fixed on the glowing center. "It is his," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. "I remember it. He always wore it. He said it was a family heirloom, a source of protection. Do you know anything about it?" Father Michel asked, his voice gentle. "Anything about its powers?" Madeline hesitated, her gaze shifting between Genevieve and Father Michel, as if weighing her options. She was clearly torn between her loyalty to Captain Moreau's memory and her desire to help them. "He never spoke of it directly," she finally said. "But I saw things. Strange things. Things I couldn't explain." She paused, her brow furrowed in concentration. "He used it to heal people," she continued, her voice low. "Wounded soldiers, civilians, even animals. He would hold the medallion over their injuries, and the wounds would close, the pain would subside. It was miraculous." Genevieve and Father Michel exchanged glances, their hearts pounding with excitement. They were on the right track. The medallion was more than just a talisman, it was a tool, a conduit for healing energy. "There's more," Madeline said, her voice hesitant. "He was working on something. Something secret. Something to do with the war." "We know," Genevieve said. "Father Michel told me. He said Captain Moreau was trying to find a way to end the bloodshed." Madeline nodded. "He believed he could use the medallion's power to influence the outcome of the war. To create a weapon of sorts. Not a weapon of destruction, but a weapon of peace." She walked over to her desk and opened a drawer, pulling out a small, wooden box. She opened the box carefully, revealing a stack of letters, tied together with a faded ribbon. "These are his letters," she said, her voice trembling. "Letters he wrote to me from the front. He confided in me. He told me things he couldn't tell anyone else." She handed the box to Genevieve, her hand shaking. "I've kept them hidden all these years," she said. "I couldn't bear to read them, but I couldn't bring myself to destroy them either. They're all I have left of him." Genevieve took the box, her heart heavy with emotion. She felt a profound sense of responsibility, of carrying on Captain Moreau's legacy, of uncovering the truth behind his unfinished mission. "Thank you, Madeline," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "You've been very brave." Madeline smiled weakly. "He would have wanted you to have them," she said. "He believed in you, even before he met you. He had a strange, incredible gift." Genevieve, Father Michel, and Madeline spent the next few hours poring over the letters. They were filled with Captain Moreau's thoughts, his observations, his hopes, and his fears. He wrote of the horrors of the war, the senseless slaughter, the suffering of the soldiers. But he also wrote of his research, his experiments with the medallion, his growing belief that he could find a way to end the conflict. The letters provided a glimpse into the brilliant and compassionate mind of Captain Moreau. He detailed many of his experiments, not just with the healing aspect of the medallion, but also strange experiments with the chateau's very design, with the constellations, and even with music. One letter, in particular, caught Genevieve's attention. It was dated just a few weeks before Captain Moreau's disappearance. "My dearest Madeline," it began, "I believe I'm on the verge of a breakthrough. I've discovered a way to amplify the medallion's power, to channel its energy on a much larger scale. I'm close, so close, to achieving my goal, to creating a force for peace that will sweep across this war-torn land and bring an end to the bloodshed. But I fear I'm running out of time. The enemy is advancing, and I may not have much longer. If anything should happen to me, please find someone you trust, someone who understands the power of the medallion, someone who can carry on my work. The fate of France, perhaps even the world, may depend on it." The letter ended abruptly, as if Captain Moreau had been interrupted. It was the last letter Madeline had received from him. Genevieve looked up from the letter, her eyes filled with tears. She felt a profound sense of sadness for this man she had never met, but also a surge of determination to fulfill his final wish. "He knew," she said, her voice trembling. "He knew he was in danger. He knew he might not survive. He entrusted you with his secret, Genevieve," Madeline said, her voice filled with emotion. "He chose you to carry on his work." "But I'm not a scientist," Genevieve protested. "I'm not a soldier. I'm just an old woman." "You're more than that, Genevieve," Father Michel said, his voice firm. "You have courage, compassion, and a connection to the medallion. You have the strength to carry on his legacy." He looked from Genevieve to Madeline. "Both of you do." The three of them looked at each other, a bond forming between them, a shared sense of purpose. They were an unlikely trio, an old widow, a weary priest, and a traumatized nurse, but they were united by a common goal, to uncover the truth about Captain Moreau's enchanted medallion and to use its power to bring peace back to their shattered world. The candle flickered, and in that small room, they made a vow. Madeline looked at both of them and somberly spoke. "We must go to his laboratory." Chapter 6. A glimpse of the past. The decision to search for Captain Moreau's laboratory was a daunting one. The chateau was vast and labyrinthine, a maze of corridors, chambers, and hidden passages. Madeline, despite having spent time there during her brief visits with Julien before his deployment, knew only the areas he had allowed her to see. The laboratory, she explained, was a secret, a place where he conducted his most sensitive research, a place he had guarded jealously. "He never spoke of its exact location," Madeline said, her voice filled with a mixture of frustration and regret. "He said it was protected, that only those who were meant to find it would be able to do so." Father Michel, ever the scholar, suggested they start their search in the library. "Julien was a man of books," he said. "He may have left clues, hidden messages, within his writings." The library was a grand, cavernous room, its walls lined with shelves reaching to the high, vaulted ceiling. Thousands of books, bound in leather and parchment, filled the shelves, their spines faded and cracked with age. The air was thick with the scent of dust and decaying paper, a smell that spoke of centuries of accumulated knowledge. They spent hours poring over the books, their fingers tracing the faded inscriptions, their eyes scanning the pages for any hint of a clue. Genevieve focused on the family chronicles, hoping to find some mention of the laboratory's location. Father Michel delved into the scientific and philosophical texts, searching for any reference to Captain Moreau's research. Madeline examined the poetry and literature, looking for hidden messages, coded language, anything that might reveal the secret. The task was overwhelming, the sheer volume of information daunting. They worked in silence, broken only by the rustling of pages and the occasional sigh of frustration. The sun began to set, casting long, eerie shadows across the room, making the task even more difficult. Just as they were about to give up, Genevieve found something. It was a small, leather-bound journal, tucked away in a hidden compartment behind a row of larger volumes. The cover was blank, but the pages were filled with Captain Moreau's handwriting, a mixture of scientific notes, philosophical musings, and personal reflections. "This is it," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. "This is his journal." They gathered around a large, wooden table, a single oil lamp illuminating the pages. Genevieve began to read aloud, her voice hesitant at first, then gaining strength as she became engrossed in Captain Moreau's words. The journal was a window into his mind, a record of his thoughts, his experiments, his hopes, and his fears. He wrote of his fascination with the medallion, his belief in its power, his determination to harness its energy for the greater good. He described his research, his attempts to understand the scientific principles behind the medallion's magic, his efforts to create a device that could amplify its power. He also wrote of his love for Madeleine, his admiration for her courage and compassion, his regret that he could not share his secret with her fully. He expressed his fears about the war, his growing sense of urgency, his premonition that he might not survive. As Genevieve read, a strange feeling came over her. She felt as if she were traveling back in time, experiencing Captain Moreau's thoughts and emotions as if they were her own. She could see him in her mind's eye, a brilliant, passionate man, driven by a desire to make a difference, to bring peace to a world consumed by war. Suddenly, she stopped reading. Her eyes had fallen upon a passage that made her heart skip a beat. The key, Captain Moreau had written, lies not in the physical, but in the ethereal. Not in the seen, but in the unseen. The laboratory is hidden not by walls of stone, but by a veil of perception. To find it, one must open one's mind, one's heart, one's soul. One must see beyond the illusion, beyond the limitations of the physical world. Genevieve looked up at Father Michel and Madeleine, her eyes wide with understanding.
"He's talking about the medallion," she said.
"He's saying that the medallion is the key to finding the laboratory." Father Michel nodded, his brow furrowed in thought.
"It's a riddle," he said.
"A test of sorts. He's challenging us to use our intuition, our imagination, our connection to the medallion." Madeleine, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "I remember something," she said, her voice hesitant. "He once told me that the chateau was built on a ley line, a line of energy that flows through the earth. He said it amplified the medallion's power." Genevieve felt a surge of excitement. "That's it," she exclaimed. "The laboratory must be located somewhere along the ley line. The medallion will guide us." She reached into her pocket and drew out the medallion, holding it in her palm. The faint glow seemed to intensify, pulsating with a rhythmic energy. She closed her eyes, focusing her mind, her heart, her soul on the medallion, allowing its energy to flow through her. She felt a tingling sensation, a warmth that spread through her body. She felt a pull, a subtle but undeniable force guiding her, drawing her towards something. She opened her eyes, her gaze fixed on a particular section of the library wall. It was a seemingly ordinary wall, covered with bookshelves like the rest of the room. But Genevieve knew, with a certainty that defied logic, that the laboratory was hidden behind it. "It's here," she said, her voice filled with conviction. "The laboratory is behind this wall." Father Michel and Madeleine exchanged glances, their expressions a mixture of skepticism and hope. They had no proof, no tangible evidence, but they trusted Genevieve's intuition, her connection to the medallion. Father Michel examined the wall carefully, running his hands along the surface, searching for any sign of a hidden door or mechanism. He found nothing. "Are you sure, Genevieve?" he asked, his voice hesitant. "I'm sure," she replied, her voice firm. She placed the medallion against the wall, pressing it firmly against the cold stone. The glow intensified, bathing the wall in a soft, ethereal light. And then, something extraordinary happened. The wall shimmered, the solid stones seeming to dissolve, revealing a hidden doorway, a dark, narrow passage leading into the unknown. It appeared as quickly as a dream, and with it, the room seemed to vibrate with a newfound energy. A collective gasp escaped the trio. Before them, a tangible piece of the captain's past and a glimpse of his future plans had appeared. Madeleine spoke, first her voice low. "He wasn't lying." Chapter 7. The Forbidden Path. The hidden doorway, revealed by the medallion's glow, led to a narrow, winding staircase that descended deep into the earth. The air was cool and damp, carrying the scent of stone and something metallic and faintly electrical. It was a smell unlike anything Genevieve had ever encountered, a mixture of the ancient and the modern, the natural and the artificial. Father Michel, ever cautious, retrieved a small, battery-powered torch from his satchel, its beam cutting through the darkness. They descended slowly, their footsteps echoing on the stone steps, their hearts pounding with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. The staircase seemed to go on forever, spiraling downwards into the depths of the chateau, as if they were entering the very bowels of the earth. As they descended, the air grew warmer, and the electrical scent intensified. They began to hear a faint humming sound, a low, rhythmic vibration that seemed to resonate within the very walls of the staircase. It was a sound that spoke of power, of hidden energy, of something alive. Finally, the staircase opened into a large, circular chamber. The room was unlike anything they had ever seen. It was a bizarre fusion of ancient architecture and futuristic technology, a space that seemed to defy the laws of time and space. The walls were made of rough-hewn stone, but they were covered with intricate carvings, symbols, and diagrams that seemed to glow with a faint, internal light. The ceiling was high and vaulted, supported by massive stone pillars, but it was also crisscrossed with a network of metal pipes, wires, and strange, glowing devices. The floor was made of polished stone, but it was inlaid with a complex pattern of geometric shapes, circles, squares, and triangles that seemed to pulsate with a faint, rhythmic energy. In the center of the room, a large, circular platform dominated the space. It was made of a strange, dark metal, and it was covered with an array of dials, switches, levers, and glowing crystals. It was Captain Moreau's laboratory. Genevieve, Father Michel, and Madeleine stood in stunned silence, their eyes wide with awe and disbelief. They had stepped into a world beyond their comprehension, a place where science and magic seemed to merge, where the boundaries between the possible and the impossible blurred. "This is incredible," Madeleine whispered, her voice filled with wonder. Father Michel, ever the scholar, was already examining the carvings on the walls, his fingers tracing the intricate designs, his mind racing to decipher their meaning. He recognized some of the symbols from his studies of ancient texts, alchemical symbols, astronomical charts, and mystical diagrams. Genevieve, drawn by an irresistible force, approached the central platform, her hand instinctively reaching for the medallion in her pocket. The glow intensified, pulsating with a powerful energy that seemed to resonate with the crystals on the platform. She stepped onto the platform, her heart pounding in her chest. She felt a surge of energy, a tingling sensation that spread through her body, as if she were connected to the very fabric of the room. She looked around, her eyes scanning the dials, the switches, the levers, trying to make sense of their purpose. Suddenly, her gaze fell upon a small, leather-bound book lying on the platform. It was similar to the journal they had found in the library, but this one was smaller, more compact, as if it were meant to be carried around. She picked it up carefully, her hands trembling. She opened the book, revealing pages filled with Captain Moreau's handwriting, a mixture of scientific notes, equations, diagrams, and instructions. It was a manual of sorts, a guide to operating the devices in the laboratory, to harnessing the power of the medallion, to achieving the goal that Captain Moreau had been so desperately seeking, a way to end the war. As Genevieve began to read, she realized the magnitude of Captain Moreau's ambition, the sheer audacity of his vision. He had not been content with merely healing the wounded or protecting individuals. He had sought to create a force, an energy field, that could influence the minds of men, that could quell the flames of hatred and violence, that could bring about a lasting peace. He had theorized that the medallion, amplified by the ley line energy and channeled through the devices in the laboratory, could generate a wave of empathy, a wave of compassion that would sweep across the battlefields, across the nations, across the world, compelling people to lay down their arms, to see each other not as enemies, but as fellow human beings. It was a breathtaking concept, a dream of a world without war, a world united by understanding and compassion. But it was also a dangerous one. The power to influence minds, to control emotions, was a power that could be easily abused, a power that could fall into the wrong hands. Genevieve looked up from the manual, her eyes meeting Father Michel's. "He was trying to create a weapon of peace," she said, her voice filled with awe. "But it's a weapon that could also be used for evil." Father Michel nodded, his face grave. "The power to control minds is a double-edged sword," he said. "It could bring about utopia, or it could lead to tyranny." Madeline, who had been examining the devices on the platform, spoke up. I think he knew the risks," she said. "I remember him saying something about safeguards. Precautions he had built into the system to prevent it from being misused." They spent the next few hours studying the manual, trying to understand the complexities of Captain Moreau's design, trying to decipher the safeguards he had put in place. They discovered that the device was not yet complete, that Captain Moreau had been interrupted before he could finish his work. There were missing components, unfinished circuits, unresolved equations. They also discovered that the device was designed to be activated by a specific sequence of actions, a series of steps that required the use of the medallion, the manipulation of the dials and levers, and the recitation of a specific incantation. It was a complex and dangerous procedure, one that could have unpredictable consequences if performed incorrectly. But it was also the only hope, the only chance to fulfill Captain Moreau's dream, to bring an end to the war. Genevieve felt a surge of responsibility, mixed with fear. The decision, now, was upon them. They could destroy the lab. They could walk away. Or they could try. "We have to try," she declared. "We have to try to finish what he started." Chapter 8. Shadows of Betrayal. Genevieve's declaration hung in the air, a bold challenge to the daunting task that lay before them. Father Michel, ever cautious, voiced his concerns. "Genevieve, this is beyond our understanding. We're not scientists, we're not magicians. We could do more harm than good." Madeline, however, was torn. She had witnessed the medallion's healing power firsthand, and she held onto a sliver of hope that Captain Moreau's grand vision could be realized. "But what if we succeed, Father?" she asked, her voice hesitant. "What if we can actually end the war?" The weight of the decision pressed down on them, the potential for both salvation and disaster hanging in the balance. Genevieve, guided by an unwavering faith in Captain Moreau's intentions and her own growing connection to the medallion, felt a deep conviction that they had to try. "We have the manual," she said, her voice firm. "We have the medallion. And we have each other. We can learn, we can adapt, we can figure it out." They spent days in the laboratory, immersing themselves in Captain Moreau's research. Father Michel, with his knowledge of ancient languages and symbols, deciphered the complex diagrams and equations. Madeline, with her practical experience as a nurse, helped to identify the missing components and devise ways to improvise replacements. Genevieve, guided by the medallion's energy and her own intuition, began to grasp the underlying principles of Captain Moreau's design, the intricate interplay between science and magic. They worked tirelessly, fueled by a shared sense of purpose and a growing belief that they could actually succeed. They faced setbacks, moments of frustration and despair, but they persevered, driven by the hope of a better future, a world without war. As they delved deeper into Captain Moreau's research, they began to uncover a darker side to the story, a shadow of betrayal that cast a pall over their efforts. They found hidden notes, coded messages, within the manual and the journal, hints of a conspiracy, of someone working against Captain Moreau, someone who wanted to sabotage his project. "He was being watched," Father Michel said, his voice low and troubled. "Someone knew about his research, someone who didn't want him to succeed." "But who?" Genevieve asked, her heart pounding with a growing sense of unease. "Who would want to prevent peace?" Madeline, who had been examining a series of encrypted letters found tucked within the pages of the manual, spoke up. I think it was someone within his own ranks," she said, her voice trembling. "Someone he trusted." The letters, when deciphered, revealed a series of communications between Captain Moreau and a high-ranking officer in the French military, a General Dubois. The early letters were cordial, filled with expressions of support and encouragement for Captain Moreau's research. But as the letters progressed, the tone changed, becoming increasingly suspicious, demanding, even threatening. General Dubois was growing impatient, Madeleine said. He wanted results, he wanted a weapon, and he didn't care how Captain Moreau achieved it. The final letter, written just days before Captain Moreau's disappearance, was chilling. General Dubois accused Captain Moreau of treason, of withholding his research from the military, of jeopardizing the war effort. He demanded that Captain Moreau hand over the medallion and the device, threatening him with dire consequences if he refused. He was betrayed, Genevieve said, her voice filled with anger and sorrow. Betrayed by someone he trusted, someone who was supposed to be on his side. The discovery cast a new light on Captain Moreau's disappearance. It was no longer a simple case of a soldier killed in action. It was a conspiracy, a deliberate act of sabotage, a betrayal that had cost Captain Moreau his life and jeopardized his dream of peace. The revelation also raised the stakes for Genevieve, Father Michel, and Madeleine. They were not only trying to finish Captain Moreau's work, they were also uncovering a dangerous secret, a secret that someone powerful wanted to keep buried. We have to be careful, Father Michel warned. If General Dubois is still alive, he could be looking for the medallion for the device. He could be watching us. They knew they were walking a dangerous path, that their efforts could have far-reaching consequences. But they also knew they couldn't turn back. They had come too far, invested too much, to abandon Captain Moreau's legacy now. They redoubled their efforts, working with a renewed sense of urgency and determination. They completed the missing components, repaired the damaged circuits, and resolved the unresolved equations. They were close, so close, to activating the device, to unleashing the power of the medallion. But as they prepared for the final step, a nagging doubt began to creep into Genevieve's mind. Something didn't feel right. There was a piece missing, a detail overlooked, a clue that eluded her grasp. She reread the manual, the journal, the letters, searching for any hint of an answer. She focused on the safeguards, the precautions Captain Moreau had built into the system to prevent it from being misused. He had emphasized the importance of intention, of the user's state of mind, of the need for pure compassion, and a selfless desire for peace. And then, it hit her. The incantation. The specific sequence of words that were required to activate the device. It was written in an ancient language, a language that Father Michel had identified as a precursor to Latin. But there was one word, one crucial word, that he had mistranslated. The word was not peace, as they had assumed. It was control. Genevieve's blood ran cold. Captain Moreau had not been trying to create a weapon of peace. He had been trying to create a weapon of control. A device that would not inspire empathy, but enforce obedience. A tool for domination, not liberation. She looked at the two people she had thought were her allies, her compatriots in this incredible journey, and wondered whether they were really working towards the same goals. She had to find out, fast. The laboratory she sensed was not safe. And she was not alone with friends. Chapter 9. Beneath a war-torn sky. The realization that the incantation's key word was control, not peace, sent a wave of icy dread through Genevieve. She looked at Father Michel and Madeleine, her supposed allies, with new eyes, seeing them not as partners in a noble quest, but as potential threats. Had they known all along? Were they deliberately misleading her? Or were they, like her, victims of a carefully crafted deception? She decided to play along, to pretend she hadn't discovered the truth, while she gathered more information and formulated a plan. She needed to understand their motivations, their allegiances, before she revealed her hand. I think I've got it, she said, forcing a smile, trying to mask the turmoil within her. The incantation, I think I understand it now. Father Michel, his face etched with a mixture of relief and excitement, clapped his hands together. Wonderful, Genevieve. You're a miracle worker. We're so close now, so close to achieving Captain Moreau's dream. Madeline, however, seemed more subdued, her gaze fixed on Genevieve with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. "Are you sure, Genevieve?" she asked, her voice hesitant. "It's a very complex incantation. Are you sure you've translated it correctly?" "I'm sure," Genevieve replied, her voice firm, though her heart was pounding in her chest. "I've checked it, double-checked it, triple-checked it. It's perfect." They gathered around the central platform, the air thick with anticipation and tension. Genevieve held the medallion in her hand, its glow pulsating with a powerful energy that seemed to reflect the turmoil within her. She looked at the dials, the switches, the levers, her mind racing to devise a way to sabotage the device, to prevent it from being used for the wrong purpose. "All right," she said, her voice steady, despite the tremor in her hands. "Let's do this. Father Michel, if you would read the incantation." Father Michel, oblivious to Genevieve's inner turmoil, nodded eagerly. He opened the manual to the relevant page, his finger tracing the ancient words, his voice filled with a mixture of reverence and excitement. As he began to recite the incantation, Genevieve subtly adjusted one of the dials on the platform, a crucial component that controlled the device's output. She had discovered, during her careful study of the manual, that this dial could be used to reverse the polarity of the energy field, to transform it from a force of control into a force of disruption. The room began to vibrate, the air crackling with energy. The crystals on the platform glowed brighter, pulsating with a rhythmic light that seemed to synchronize with the beat of Genevieve's heart. She felt a surge of power, a tingling sensation that spread through her body, as if she were becoming one with the device. Father Michel finished the incantation, his voice rising to a crescendo. The room fell silent, the only sound the humming of the device, the crackling of the energy field. They waited, their breaths held, their eyes fixed on the platform, expecting something. But nothing happened. Father Michel looked at Genevieve, his face a mixture of confusion and disappointment. What went wrong?" he asked, his voice trembling. Genevieve feigned ignorance, shrugging her shoulders. I don't know," she said, her voice hesitant. "I followed the instructions exactly. I don't understand." Madeline, however, was not so easily fooled. She stepped forward, her eyes narrowed, her gaze fixed on the dial that Genevieve had adjusted. "You did something," she said, her voice accusing. "You changed something. You sabotaged the device." Genevieve met her gaze, her expression defiant. "Yes," she admitted. "I did. Because I discovered the truth. This device, it's not a weapon of peace. It's a weapon of control." Father Michel gasped, his face paling. What are you talking about, Genevieve? That's impossible." "It's true," Genevieve said, her voice firm. "The incantation, you mistranslated it. The key word is not peace. It's control." Madeline's expression hardened. "You're lying," she said, her voice cold. "You're trying to steal the device for yourself. You're working for the enemy."
No, Genevieve pretestit.
"I'm trying to prevent a disaster. This device, it's too dangerous. It shouldn't be used by anyone." A tense standoff ensued, the three of them locked in a silent battle of wills. The air crackled with unspoken accusations, with suspicion and betrayal. The fate of the device, of Captain Moreau's legacy, hung in the balance. Suddenly, the ground began to shake. The chateau, weakened by years of neglect and the recent bombardment, was beginning to crumble. Dust and debris rained down from the ceiling. The walls creaked and groaned, and the floor beneath their feet trembled. "We have to get out of here," Father Michel cried, his voice filled with panic. "The whole place is coming down." They had no choice but to flee. They scrambled out of the laboratory, up the winding staircase, and through the crumbling corridors of the chateau. The building was collapsing around them, the walls cracking, the ceilings caving in, the floors giving way. They reached the hidden entrance just as the roof of the kitchen collapsed, sending a cloud of dust and debris billowing into the night air. They stumbled out into the overgrown gardens, gasping for breath, their clothes covered in dust and grime. They looked back at the chateau, a crumbling ruin silhouetted against the war-torn sky. The laboratory, with its secrets and its dangers, was buried beneath tons of rubble. They were safe for now. But they were also stranded, alone in the darkness, with nothing but the clothes on their backs and the medallion in Genevieve's pocket. The war raged on, the distant rumble of artillery fire a constant reminder of the conflict that still consumed the world. But beneath the war-torn sky, a new battle had begun. A battle for the truth, for the future, for the soul of humanity. Genevieve looked at the two figures standing with her and spoke quietly but firmly. "It isn't over," she said, and she heard a faint rumble of thunder. Chapter 10. The Heart's True North. The collapse of the chateau left Genevieve, Father Michel, and Madeleine shaken but alive. They stood amidst the overgrown gardens, the ruins of the once grand structure silhouetted against the pre-dawn sky. The distant rumble of artillery served as a constant, grim reminder of the war that raged beyond their immediate predicament. Genevieve knew they couldn't stay there. The chateau's destruction would undoubtedly attract attention, both from German patrols and potentially from General Dubois, if he was still alive and searching for the medallion. She clutched the artifact in her pocket, its familiar warmth a small comfort in the face of their uncertain future. "We need to get to safety," she said, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. "Somewhere we can regroup and decide what to do next." Father Michel, still shaken by the near-death experience and the revelation about the incantation, seemed lost and confused. "Where can we go, Genevieve?" he asked, his voice weak. "Everywhere is dangerous." Madeleine, however, remained surprisingly calm, her eyes scanning the horizon with a calculating intensity that made Genevieve uneasy. "There's a small village, not far from here," she said. "Saint Remy. It's off the main roads. It might be safe for a while." Genevieve was hesitant to trust Madeleine completely, given the recent revelations about the medallion's true purpose. But she had no other options. They needed shelter, food, and a place to plan their next move. "All right," she agreed. "Saint Remy it is. But we stay together. And we watch each other." The journey to Saint Remy was arduous, a constant test of their endurance and resilience. They navigated through dense forests, across treacherous ravines, and along muddy, overgrown paths. The ever-present threat of discovery by German patrols added to the tension, forcing them to move cautiously and quietly. As they walked, Genevieve tried to make sense of the tangled web of deception and betrayal that had ensnared them. She couldn't shake the feeling that Madeleine was hiding something, that she had a hidden agenda. Her calm demeanor, her knowledge of the area, her insistence on going to Saint Remy, it all seemed too convenient. And then there was Father Michel. The revelation about the incantation had shattered his faith in Captain Moreau, in the very foundation of their mission. He seemed lost, his spirit broken, his usual gentle optimism replaced by a deep, unsettling despair. Genevieve felt alone, isolated, despite being surrounded by two companions. She longed for someone she could truly trust, someone who shared her vision of a better future, someone who believed in the possibility of peace. As they neared Saint Remy, they encountered a sight that made their hearts sink. The village, like so many others in the region, had been ravaged by the war. Buildings were reduced to rubble, fields were scarred with shell craters, and the air was thick with the scent of smoke and decay. But amidst the devastation, there were signs of life. A few houses remained intact, smoke curling from their chimneys. They saw a few villagers, their faces etched with weariness and resilience, going about their daily tasks, trying to rebuild their lives amidst the ruins. Madeleine led them to a small, unassuming cottage on the outskirts of the village. It was partially damaged, but it offered some semblance of shelter.
"We can stay here," she said.
"It's empty. The family who lived here, they fled." They entered the cottage cautiously, their senses on high alert. The interior was sparsely furnished, but it was relatively clean and dry. They found some remnants of food, a few blankets, and a fireplace that, with a little effort, they managed to get working. As they settled in, Genevieve couldn't shake the feeling of unease. She watched Madeleine carefully, noticing the way she moved, the way she spoke, the way she avoided direct eye contact. There was something off. Later that evening, as they sat around the flickering fire, Genevieve decided to confront Madeline. "Madeline," she said, her voice calm but firm, "I need to know the truth. What's your connection to General Du Bois?" Madeline's eyes widened in surprise, and then, in fear. She hesitated, her gaze darting around the room, as if looking for an escape. "I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered. "Don't lie to me," Genevieve said, her voice hardening. "I know about the letters. I know about the betrayal. I know that Captain Moreau was trying to create a weapon of control, not peace." Madeline's facade crumbled. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she buried her face in her hands. It's complicated," she sobbed. I was forced to do it. He threatened my family." Genevieve's heart softened slightly. She understood the power of coercion, the desperation that could drive someone to betray their principles. But she still needed answers. "Tell me everything," she said, her voice gentler now. "Tell me the whole story." Madeline, her voice trembling, began to recount her tale. She had been recruited by General Du Bois shortly after Captain Moreau's disappearance. Du Bois knew about her relationship with Julien, about her knowledge of his research. He threatened to harm her family, to expose her as a traitor if she didn't cooperate. He forced her to infiltrate the resistance, to search for the medallion and the device. He promised her that he would use the weapon to end the war quickly, to save lives. She had believed him at first. But as she learned more about his true intentions, about his ruthless ambition, she realized she had made a terrible mistake. "I was a fool," she said, her voice filled with self-reproach. "I was blinded by fear, by my desire to protect my family. I betrayed Julien. I betrayed everything he stood for." Genevieve looked at Madeline, seeing not an enemy, but a victim of war, of manipulation, of her own desperate choices. She felt a surge of compassion, a sense of shared humanity. "It's not too late," Genevieve said, her voice filled with hope. "We can still fix this. We can still use the medallion for good." She looked at Father Michel, who had been silent throughout the exchange. He looked up, his eyes filled with a newfound determination. "What do we do, Genevieve?" Genevieve had a plan. She had discovered another detail, one that was crucial. The disruption, if channeled correctly, could also act as a beacon, attracting those who were sensitive to its power. She just needed to use it. She glanced at the window. She had to go outside. She had a direction in mind, though she could not explain why. The medallion, it seemed, was not just guiding her. It was calling to someone, and in that calling, their best chance at finding their true ally. "We find someone we can trust," she declared, standing. Chapter 11. Whispers of Espionage. Genevieve's decision to use the medallion as a beacon, a call to someone who could truly be trusted, was a gamble. She had no idea who might respond, or if anyone would respond at all. But she felt a deep conviction, a pull from the medallion itself, guiding her towards an unknown destination, an unknown ally. She explained her plan to Father Michel and Madeline, her voice filled with a mixture of hope and trepidation. "The medallion's energy, it's not just for control or disruption," she said. "It can also be used to communicate, to connect with others who are sensitive to its power. I believe there's someone out there, someone who understands the medallion, someone who can help us." Father Michel, his faith rekindled by Genevieve's unwavering determination, nodded in agreement. "I trust you, Genevieve," he said. "I trust your intuition, your connection to the medallion." Madeline, however, remained skeptical.
"It's a long shot, Genevieve," she said.
"We don't even know if such a person exists. And if they do, how will we know they're trustworthy?" "We'll have to trust our instincts," Genevieve replied. "We'll have to use our judgment. We have no other choice." Under the cover of darkness, they left the cottage and ventured into the war-torn landscape surrounding St. Remy. Genevieve, guided by the medallion's pull, led them towards a nearby hilltop, a vantage point that offered a clear view of the surrounding countryside. The night was cold and clear, the stars shining brightly in the inky sky. The distant rumble of artillery fire served as a constant reminder of the war that raged just beyond their reach. Genevieve felt a pang of sorrow for all the lives lost, for all the suffering caused by the conflict. She hoped, with all her heart, that her gamble would pay off, that she could find someone who could help her bring an end to the bloodshed. When they reached the hilltop, Genevieve took out the medallion, holding it in her palm. The faint glow intensified, pulsating with a rhythmic energy that seemed to synchronize with the beat of her heart. She closed her eyes, focusing her mind, her heart, her soul on the medallion, allowing its energy to flow through her. She spoke a modified version of Captain Moreau's own incantation, carefully weaving a call. She felt a tingling sensation, a warmth that spread through her body. She felt a connection, a link to something, someone out there in the darkness. She opened her eyes, her gaze fixed on the horizon, searching for any sign of a response. At first, nothing happened. The night remained silent, the stars unwavering in their celestial dance. Genevieve began to doubt herself, to question her intuition. Had she made a mistake? Was she chasing a phantom, a figment of her imagination? But then she saw it, a faint light, flickering in the distance, answering her call. It was a small, almost imperceptible glow, but it was there, a beacon of hope in the vast darkness. "There," she exclaimed, her voice filled with excitement.
Someone's out there.
Someone responded. Father Michel and Madeleine followed her gaze, their eyes widening in surprise. They, too, saw the faint light flickering in the distance. It's incredible," Father Michel whispered, his voice filled with awe. Madeleine, however, remained cautious. "We don't know who it is," she warned. "It could be a trap." "We have to take the risk," Genevieve said. "We have no other choice." They descended the hilltop and began to move towards the light, their hearts pounding with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. As they drew closer, the light grew stronger, revealing the source, a small, makeshift camp, hidden amidst a cluster of trees. A figure emerged from the camp, silhouetted against the flickering light of a campfire. It was a man, tall and lean, dressed in the tattered uniform of a French soldier. He held a rifle in his hand, his eyes scanning the darkness, his expression wary. Genevieve stepped forward, holding the medallion aloft. "We mean you no harm," she said, her voice clear and strong. "We're looking for a friend." The soldier approached them cautiously, his eyes fixed on the medallion. He lowered his rifle slightly, his expression softening. "The medallion," he whispered, his voice filled with recognition. "You know of Captain Moreau?" Genevieve nodded. "We do," she replied. "We're trying to finish his work." The soldier's eyes widened in surprise, and then in hope. I was his second in command," he said, his voice trembling. "Lieutenant Dubois." The name sent a shiver down Genevieve's spine, echoing the name of their enemy, the general. But she held her focus. "I was there when he disappeared. I've been searching for him ever since, trying to uncover the truth behind his disappearance." He stepped closer, examining the medallion with a mixture of awe and sorrow. "He entrusted me with a secret," he continued. "A message, to be delivered to someone who possessed the medallion. Someone who could carry on his work." Genevieve, Father Michel, and Madeleine exchanged glances, their hearts pounding with excitement. They had found their ally, their true connection to Captain Moreau's legacy. Or, at least, they hoped they had. This man shared the name of their enemy. Could it be a coincidence? A trick? Or something else entirely? But Genevieve felt it, deeply, in her soul. The medallion resonated with the man. He was not lying. He was, however, afraid.
"We must leave," he said. "Now."
"Before they find us." "Who?" Genevieve asked, her voice trembling. "Who are you talking about?" The soldier's face was pale, in the firelight. He looked around and leaned in. "Spies," he whispered. "German spies. They're everywhere. And they're looking for the medallion, too. And worse that they know about its true power." Chapter 12. The Unspoken Bond. Lieutenant Dubois's revelation about German spies searching for the medallion sent a wave of fear and urgency through the group. They knew they had to leave immediately, to find a safer place to discuss Captain Moreau's secret message and plan their next move. "We can't stay here," Lieutenant Dubois said, his voice low and urgent. "They could be watching us even now. We need to get to my safe house. It's not far from here, hidden in the woods." They followed him quickly and quietly through the darkness, their senses on high alert, scanning the shadows for any sign of pursuit. The lieutenant, despite his fear, moved with a confidence and agility that spoke of his military training. He seemed to know the terrain intimately, guiding them along hidden paths and through dense undergrowth. The safe house turned out to be a small, abandoned hunting cabin, well concealed amidst a thicket of trees. It was rustic and sparsely furnished, but it offered a degree of shelter and privacy. They barricaded the door and windows, and Lieutenant Dubois lit a small, carefully shielded lantern, casting a dim, flickering light across the room. Genevieve, still reeling from the revelation about the spies, studied Lieutenant Dubois carefully. He was a young man, perhaps in his late 20s, with a lean, wiry build and a face that bore the marks of hardship and determination. His eyes, though filled with fear, also held a spark of intelligence and something else. A deep, abiding sadness that resonated with Genevieve's own sense of loss. He was clearly different from General Dubois, but the shared name was still a source of quiet unease. "Tell me about Captain Moreau," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Tell me everything you know." Lieutenant Dubois nodded, his gaze meeting hers. "Captain Moreau was an extraordinary man," he began, his voice filled with admiration and respect. "Brilliant, compassionate, driven. He believed in a better future, a world without war. But he also knew the dangers of his research, the potential for his work to be misused. He recounted his experiences with Captain Moreau, his admiration for the captain's intellect, and his unwavering commitment to peace. He spoke of the captain's secret research, his experiments with the medallion, his growing fear of being betrayed. He knew he was being watched," Lieutenant Dubois said. He suspected that someone within his own ranks was working against him. He didn't know who, but he knew he was in danger. "General Dubois," Genevieve said, her voice filled with a mixture of anger and suspicion. "Was he the one?" Lieutenant Dubois hesitated, his expression troubled. I don't know," he admitted. "I know they had a falling out. The general wanted the medallion. He wanted Captain Moreau's research. But I don't know if he was responsible for his disappearance." He paused, his gaze drifting towards the medallion in Genevieve's pocket. "The message," he said. "Captain Moreau entrusted me with a message, to be delivered to the one who possessed the medallion. He said it was crucial, that it held the key to unlocking the medallion's true potential." Genevieve's heart pounded with anticipation. "What is the message?" she asked, her voice trembling. Lieutenant Dubois took a deep breath, his eyes locking with hers. He said, "The heart's true north lies not in power, but in compassion. Only those who seek to heal, not to control, can unlock the medallion's full potential. Seek the one whose heart beats in harmony with the earth, whose spirit is as free as the wind. They will know the way." The message was cryptic, a riddle wrapped in a metaphor. But Genevieve felt a spark of understanding, a glimmer of hope. It was a confirmation of her own belief, of her own intuition, that the medallion's true power lay not in domination, but in healing, in connection, in empathy. "The one whose heart beats in harmony with the earth," she repeated, her voice thoughtful. "Whose spirit is as free as the wind, who is he talking about?" They pondered the riddle, their minds racing to decipher its meaning. Father Michel, ever the scholar, suggested it might refer to someone with a deep connection to nature, a hermit, a mystic, someone who lived outside the confines of society. Madeline, with her practical experience, thought it might be a code, a reference to a specific location, a hidden sanctuary. Lieutenant Dubois, however, had a different interpretation. I think he's talking about a person," he said. "Someone with a specific gift. Someone who can communicate with the medallion on a deeper level. Someone who can unlock its full potential." He paused, his gaze meeting Genevieve's. "I think he's talking about you." Genevieve was taken aback.
"Me?"
she said, her voice filled with surprise. "But I'm just an old woman." I'm not a scientist, I'm not a soldier, I'm not. You have a connection to the medallion, Lieutenant Dubois interrupted. I saw it. I felt it. You're the one he was talking about. You're the one who can carry on his work. Genevieve felt a surge of emotion, a mixture of fear and excitement, of doubt and determination. She looked at the medallion in her hand, its faint glow pulsating with a rhythmic energy that seemed to mirror the beating of her own heart. She felt a deep connection to Captain Moreau, to his vision, to his legacy. She looked at the others. Lieutenant Dubois, the carrier of the message. Father Michel, the keeper of knowledge. And Madeleine, the repentant betrayer. All three were, in some way, connected to this journey. But she felt, deeply, that she was, indeed, at the center. The heart's true north, it was not a place. It was a feeling. And the medallion had been leading her, all along. We need to find a way to amplify the medallion's power, she said, her voice firm, to send a stronger signal, to reach out to those who can help us. We need to find a place of power, a place where the Earth's energy is strong. She paused, suddenly knowing where they needed to go. She smiled. I know just the place, she declared. We go at dawn to the Standing Stones. Chapter 13. Scars of Remembrance. The Standing Stones, known locally as Les Pierres Levis, were an ancient site, a circle of weathered monoliths that predated even the Roman occupation of Gaul. They stood on a windswept hill overlooking the valley, a place of power and mystery, imbued with the echoes of centuries of forgotten rituals and beliefs. Genevieve had visited them often as a child, drawn by their silent grandeur and the sense of connection to the past that they evoked. She had always felt a strange energy there, a subtle vibration that seemed to resonate within her very bones. She was about 6 years old when she first went to the stones. As dawn broke, painting the sky with hues of pink and gold, Genevieve, Lieutenant Dubois, Father Michel, and Madeleine arrived at the site. The air was crisp and cold, carrying the scent of damp earth and wild thyme. The Standing Stones, silhouetted against the rising sun, cast long, eerie shadows across the dew-kissed grass. This is it, Genevieve said, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and determination. This is where we'll make our stand. They gathered within the circle of stones, their senses on high alert. Genevieve took out the medallion, holding it aloft. The faint glow intensified, pulsating with a powerful energy that seemed to synchronize with the rhythm of the earth. She closed her eyes, focusing her mind, her heart, her soul on the medallion, allowing its energy to flow through her. She began to recite the modified incantation, the words resonating with the ancient stones, with the wind, with the very fabric of the landscape. She felt a surge of power, a tingling sensation that spread through her body as if she were becoming one with the earth, with the sky, with the universe. As she chanted, the medallion's glow grew brighter, casting a circle of ethereal light around them. The air crackled with energy, and a faint humming sound filled the air, growing in intensity with each passing moment. Suddenly, the ground began to tremble. The Standing Stones vibrated, and a wave of energy pulsed outwards from the circle, spreading across the valley, across the war-torn landscape, carrying Genevieve's call, her plea for help, to anyone who could hear it, to anyone who could understand. They waited, their breaths held, their eyes fixed on the horizon, expecting something. But nothing happened. The shaking subsided, the humming faded, and the light of the medallion returned to its normal, faint glow. Disappointment washed over Genevieve. Had she failed? Was her connection to the medallion not strong enough? Was there no one out there who could help them? But then they heard it. A faint sound, carried on the wind, approaching from the east. It was the sound of footsteps. Many footsteps. They tensed, their hands reaching for weapons, their eyes scanning the horizon. Were they German spies? Were they General Dubois's men? Were they about to be captured? Or worse? As the footsteps grew closer, they saw them. A group of figures, emerging from the morning mist, approaching the circle of stones. They were not soldiers. They were civilians. Men, women, and even a few children, their faces etched with weariness and fear, but also with a glimmer of hope. They stopped a short distance from the circle, their eyes fixed on Genevieve, on the medallion in her hand. They seemed hesitant, uncertain, but also drawn. An elderly woman stepped forward, her face wrinkled and weathered, but her eyes bright and intelligent. She looked at Genevieve, her gaze piercing and knowing. "You called," she said, her voice clear and strong. "We heard you." Genevieve's heart leaped with joy. They had found them, the ones who could help, the ones who understood the medallion's power. We need your help," Genevieve said, her voice trembling with emotion. "We're trying to end the war." The elderly woman nodded.
"We know," she said.
"We've been waiting for you." She turned to the others, her voice ringing out across the hilltop.
"These are the ones," she said.
"The ones who will help us heal the land, heal the world." The group of civilians surged forward, surrounding Genevieve, Father Michel, Madeleine, and Lieutenant Dubois, their faces filled with a mixture of gratitude and determination. They were a diverse group, representing all walks of life: farmers, teachers, doctors, artists, musicians, even a few former soldiers who had deserted the war, disillusioned by the senseless slaughter. They were the healers, the protectors, the ones who believed in the power of compassion, the ones who had kept the ancient traditions alive, the ones who understood the language of the earth, the language of the heart. As Genevieve looked at their faces, she realized the true meaning of Captain Moreau's message. The heart's true north was not a place, it was not a person, it was a community. A network of interconnected souls, bound together by a shared belief in the power of love, of empathy, of healing. The elderly woman revealed herself as Anya, and she was a descendant of druids, of the old ways. She was a protector of the land. "We will help you," Anya said, "but first, you must understand. This power, it comes with a price. Scars will remain, and some will not survive the healing." Genevieve nodded. Madeleine spoke up. "First, I will gladly pay that price." Father Michel and Lieutenant Dubois followed. The war had scarred them, too. Anya smiled and gestured to her people, and they stepped forward. They would work together. They would use the medallion and its disruption to heal the world. But first they needed to prepare. They needed a plan. The healing was about to begin. But so was the true, final battle. Chapter 14. A Dance of Fate. Anya and her people, the keepers of the old ways, wasted no time. They understood the urgency of the situation, the need to act quickly before the German spies or General Dubois discover their plans. They led Genevieve, Father Michel, Madeleine, and Lieutenant Dubois to a hidden sanctuary, a secluded valley nestled deep within the hills, a place where the earth's energy was strong and the veil between worlds was thin. The sanctuary was a breathtaking sight, a hidden oasis of peace and tranquility amidst the war-torn landscape. A crystal-clear stream flowed through the valley, its banks lined with lush vegetation and ancient trees. Waterfalls cascaded down moss-covered cliffs, creating a symphony of soothing sounds. The air was fresh and clean, carrying the scent of wildflowers and pine. Anya explained that the valley was a sacred place, a nexus of ley lines, a place where the medallion's power could be amplified to its full potential. She and her people had been preparing for this moment, for the arrival of the one who could wield the medallion, the one who could heal the land and end the war. They set about creating a ritual circle, a sacred space where they would work together to channel the medallion's energy. They gathered stones, flowers, herbs, and crystals, arranging them in a complex geometric pattern that resonated with the Earth's energy and the medallion's power. Anya explained the plan. They would use the medallion's disruptive energy, not to control minds, but to disrupt the patterns of hatred and violence that fueled the war. They would send out a wave of empathy, of compassion, that would sweep across the battlefields, across the nations, compelling people to see each other not as enemies, but as fellow human beings. It was a risky undertaking, a delicate balance between disruption and healing. They had to be careful not to cause further chaos, not to exacerbate the already volatile situation. They had to focus their intention, their energy on the positive outcome, on the vision of a world without war, a world united by understanding and compassion. As they prepared for the ritual, Genevieve felt a growing sense of connection to Anya, to her people, to the earth itself. She realized that she had found her true calling, her true purpose. She was not just an old woman, a widow, a survivor of war. She was a healer, a protector, a conduit for the medallion's power, a catalyst for change. The ritual began at sunset, as the last rays of the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and purple. Anya, standing in the center of the circle, held the medallion aloft, its glow intensifying, pulsating with a powerful energy that seemed to synchronize with the rhythm of the earth. The others joined hands, forming a circle around Anya, their voices blending in a harmonious chant, an ancient invocation that resonated with the standing stones, with the wind, with the very fabric of the landscape. Genevieve felt a surge of power, a tingling sensation that spread through her body as if she were becoming one with the earth, with the sky, with the universe. As the chant reached its crescendo, Anya raised the medallion higher, focusing its energy towards the heavens. A beam of light shot upwards from the medallion, piercing the twilight sky, carrying their intention, their plea for peace, to the farthest reaches of the world. The air crackled with energy, and a wave of vibration pulsed outwards from the circle, spreading across the valley, across the war-torn landscape, carrying the message of empathy, of compassion, of healing. They waited, their breaths held, their eyes fixed on the horizon, expecting something. But the immediate effects were subtle, almost imperceptible. The distant rumble of artillery fire continued, the war raged on, seemingly unaffected by their efforts. Doubt began to creep into Genevieve's mind. Had they failed? Was their vision of peace just a naive dream, a futile attempt to change the course of history? But Anya remained calm, her eyes filled with a knowing wisdom. "It has begun," she said, her voice soft but firm. "The seeds have been planted. The healing has started. But it will take time. It will take patience. And it will take courage." As if in response to her words, a messenger arrived, breathless and exhausted, bearing news from the front lines. He reported strange occurrences, stories of soldiers laying down their arms, of enemies helping each other, of a growing sense of unease and disillusionment among the troops. The medallion's energy was working, subtly but surely, disrupting the patterns of hatred and violence, planting the seeds of empathy and compassion in the hearts of those who were caught in the throes of war. But the news was not all good. The messenger also reported that General Dubois, driven by a desperate desire to regain control, had launched a massive offensive, a brutal assault that threatened to escalate the conflict to unimaginable levels of destruction. "He knows," Anya said, her face grave. "He knows about the medallion, about our efforts. He's trying to stop us, to crush the resistance before it can spread." They knew they had to act quickly, to counter General Dubois's offensive, to protect the fragile seeds of peace that they had planted. They decided to split their forces. Anya and her people would remain in the sanctuary, continuing to amplify the medallion's energy, sending out waves of empathy and compassion to counter the general's aggression. Genevieve, Lieutenant Dubois, Father Michel, and Madeleine would embark on a dangerous mission, a journey to the heart of the conflict, to confront General Dubois and stop him from unleashing further destruction. They would be the spear, and Anya, the shield. It was a perilous path, fraught with danger and uncertainty. But they were united by a common purpose, by a shared belief in the possibility of peace, by a willingness to sacrifice everything for a better future. They departed at dawn, their hearts filled with both hope and trepidation, embarking on a new dance. A Dance of Fate. Chapter 15. The Price of Loyalty. The journey to the front lines was a harrowing descent into the heart of darkness. Genevieve, Lieutenant Dubois, Father Michel, and Madeleine traversed a landscape ravaged by war, a wasteland of shell craters, shattered forests, and abandoned villages. The air was thick with the stench of death and decay, the constant rumble of artillery fire a grim reminder of the ongoing conflict. They moved cautiously, avoiding main roads and known patrol routes, relying on Lieutenant Dubois's knowledge of the terrain and his network of resistance contacts. They encountered scenes of unimaginable horror: wounded soldiers, starving civilians, refugees fleeing the fighting, their faces etched with despair and desperation. Genevieve, despite her age and the hardships she had endured, found a renewed strength within her. The medallion, tucked securely in her pocket, seemed to radiate a warmth that seeped into her very bones, bolstering her courage and determination. She felt a profound sense of responsibility, of carrying on Captain Moreau's legacy, of bringing an end to the senseless slaughter. Along the way, they faced numerous challenges. They narrowly avoided German patrols, navigated treacherous minefields, and endured hunger, thirst, and exhaustion. But they persevered, driven by their shared commitment to peace and their unwavering belief in the power of the medallion. Lieutenant Dubois, despite his initial fear and his connection to the disgraced General Dubois, proved to be a valuable ally. He was resourceful, courageous, and fiercely loyal to Captain Moreau's memory. He shared his knowledge of the French military, its strategies, its weaknesses, and its secrets, helping them to navigate the complex and dangerous world of wartime espionage. Father Michel, though initially broken by the revelation about the incantation's true meaning, found a renewed sense of purpose in their mission. He provided spiritual guidance, offering comfort and solace to those they encountered along the way. He also used his knowledge of ancient languages and symbols to decipher coded messages and uncover hidden clues, helping them to unravel the conspiracy surrounding Captain Moreau's disappearance. Madeleine, burdened by the guilt of her past betrayal, sought redemption through her actions. She used her medical skills to tend to the wounded, offering comfort and healing to those who were suffering. She also used her knowledge of General Dubois's tactics and his network of contacts to help them anticipate his moves and avoid his traps. As they neared the front lines, they learned that General Dubois had established his headquarters in a heavily fortified chateau, not far from where Captain Moreau had disappeared. It was a strategic location, overlooking a key battlefield where the general was planning his final, decisive offensive. They knew that confronting him directly would be suicidal. They needed a plan, a strategy that would allow them to infiltrate the chateau, neutralize the general, and prevent him from unleashing his destructive attack. Lieutenant Dubois, using his contacts within the resistance, managed to secure a set of forged documents, identifying them as a medical team sent to inspect the chateau's facilities. It was a risky gambit, but it was their only chance to get close to the general. Under the cover of darkness, they approached the chateau, their hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. The building was a formidable fortress, surrounded by high walls, barbed wire, and heavily armed guards. The air was thick with tension, the constant threat of discovery hanging over them like a dark cloud. Using their forged documents, they managed to bluff their way past the outer defenses, gaining access to the chateau grounds. But as they moved deeper into the fortress, they encountered increasingly stringent security measures, checkpoints, patrols, and suspicious glances. They reached the main building, a grand, imposing structure that exuded power and authority. They were escorted to a waiting room, where they were told to remain until the general was ready to see them. As they waited, Genevieve felt a growing sense of unease. Something didn't feel right. The atmosphere was too tense, the guards too watchful, the silence too oppressive. Suddenly, the door burst open, and a group of soldiers stormed into the room, their rifles pointed at Genevieve and her companions. General Dubois himself strode in behind them, his face a mask of cold fury. "You are under arrest," he snarled, his voice dripping with venom.
Spies.
Traitors. You will pay for your treachery. They had been betrayed. Someone had tipped off the general, someone who knew about their mission, someone who wanted them to fail. Genevieve looked at her companions, her heart sinking. Lieutenant Dubois, Father Michel, and Madeleine, were they all in on it? Had they been playing her all along? But as she met their gazes, she saw not deception, but fear, surprise, and a shared sense of betrayal. They were as shocked as she was. The soldiers moved to seize them, but Lieutenant Dubois reacted instantly. He lunged at the nearest guard, disarming him and using his rifle to create a diversion. Father Michel, despite his age, grabbed a chair and swung it at another soldier, knocking him to the ground. Madeleine, using her medical kit as a weapon, struck a third guard, sending him reeling. A chaotic melee ensued, a desperate struggle for survival against overwhelming odds. Genevieve, caught in the middle of the chaos, reached for the medallion in her pocket, her only remaining weapon. She held it aloft, focusing her intention, her energy on disruption, on chaos, on anything that could give them a chance to escape. The medallion glowed brightly, pulsating with a powerful energy that filled the room. The lights flickered and died, plunging the room into darkness. The soldiers, disoriented and confused, fired their weapons wildly, their bullets ricocheting off the walls. Genevieve and her companions used the chaos to their advantage, fighting their way towards the door, their only hope of escape. They were outnumbered, outgunned, but they were not defeated. They were fighting for their lives, for their freedom, for the future of France. But the general had anticipated everything. And in the darkened hallway, he spoke, his voice filled with venom. Loyalty, he hissed, has its price. And all of you will pay. Chapter 16. The Unveiling of Truth. General Dubois's words hung in the darkness, a chilling pronouncement of doom. The chaotic melee continued, the sounds of gunfire, shouting, and struggling filling the air. Genevieve, despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins, felt a wave of despair. They were trapped, outnumbered, and outmaneuvered. But she refused to give up. She clutched the medallion, focusing its energy, channeling her desperation into a surge of disruptive power. The air crackled with electricity, and a wave of disorientation swept through the room, causing the soldiers to stumble and falter.
Now,
Genevieve shouted, her voice ringing out above the din run. They used the momentary confusion to their advantage, breaking free from the melee and dashing towards the door. Lieutenant Dubois, leading the way, used his rifle but to smash the lock, and they burst out into the corridor, their hearts pounding in their chests. They found themselves in a long, dimly lit hallway, lined with doors on either side. The sounds of pursuit echoed behind them, the soldiers regaining their composure and closing in fast. This way, Lieutenant Dubois shouted, leading them towards a staircase at the end of the corridor. We need to get to the roof. We can signal for help. They raced up the stairs, their footsteps echoing on the stone steps, the sounds of pursuit growing closer. They reached the top floor, a maze of narrow corridors and storage rooms. Suddenly, a figure stepped out in front of them, blocking their path. It was Madeleine, her face pale, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination.
Stop,
she cried, her voice trembling. You can't go any further. He's waiting for you. Genevieve's heart sank. Had Madeleine betrayed them again? Was she working with General Dubois after all? But as she looked at Madeleine's face, she saw not deception, but desperation. A desperate plea for them to listen, to understand. What are you talking about, Madeleine? Genevieve asked, her voice wary. Who's waiting for us? The general, Madeleine replied, her voice barely a whisper. He knows about the medallion. He knows about its power. He wants to use it to win the war. At any cost. We know that, Genevieve said, her voice impatient. We know he's a monster. We have to stop him.
But you don't understand, Madeleine pleaded.
He's not just trying to control minds. He's trying to amplify the medallion's power. To create a weapon of unimaginable destruction. He's going to use it on the battlefield to wipe out the enemy and anyone else who stands in his way. Genevieve's blood ran cold. She remembered Captain Moreau's research, his warnings about the medallion's potential for misuse. He had feared that it could fall into the wrong hands, that it could be used to unleash unimaginable destruction. We have to stop him, Genevieve said, her voice filled with a newfound urgency. We have to get to the medallion. It's too late, Madeleine said, her voice filled with despair. He's already activated it. He's on the roof, preparing to unleash its power. They heard a low, humming sound, growing in intensity, vibrating through the very walls of the chateau. It was the medallion, amplified to its full potential, its energy building to a catastrophic crescendo. They had to act quickly before it was too late. They raced towards the roof access, pushing past Madeline, their hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. They burst out onto the roof, their eyes blinded by a blinding light. The medallion, mounted on a makeshift device, was glowing with an intense, pulsating energy, bathing the rooftop in an eerie, otherworldly glow. General Dubois stood beside the device, his face contorted in a mask of triumph and madness. He saw them, and a cruel smile spread across his lips. "You're too late," he sneered. "The power is mine. I will crush the enemy. I will win the war. I will rule France." He raised his hands, preparing to unleash the medallion's destructive power. Genevieve knew they had only seconds to act. She looked at Lieutenant Dubois, at Father Michel, their faces pale but resolute. They were ready to fight, to sacrifice everything to stop the general. But Genevieve knew there was only one way to truly defeat him. It wasn't with violence, with force, but with compassion. She stepped forward, holding the medallion's replica, the one she had used throughout the adventure, which contained a shard of the original in her hand. She focused her intention, her energy, not on disruption, but on healing, on empathy, on understanding. She spoke to the general, her voice clear and strong, resonating with the power of the medallion.
"General Dubois," she said,
"I know you've suffered. I know you've lost. I know you're driven by fear and pain. But this is not the way. This will not bring peace. This will only bring more destruction, more suffering." The general hesitated, his eyes flickering with a flicker of doubt. The medallion's energy, amplified by Genevieve's compassion, was reaching him, touching his heart, breaking through his wall of hatred and anger. You don't understand," he stammered, his voice losing its conviction. "I have to do this. I have to win. For France." "No," Genevieve said, her voice gentle but firm. "You have to stop. You have to choose a different path. You have to choose love." The general's resolve crumbled. Tears welled up in his eyes, and he lowered his hands, his body shaking with sobs. The medallion's glow subsided, the humming faded, and the rooftop was plunged into silence. The war was not over. But the immediate threat, the catastrophic weapon, was neutralized. As the soldiers arrived to take the general away, he looked at them, sadly. Madeline stepped forward and looked him in the eyes. "It's not your fault, uncle," she said sadly. Genevieve and the others were shocked. General Dubois was Madeline's uncle. All along, she had been protecting him, knowing the truth, but hoping to redeem him. The truth was unveiled. But the battle was far from over. Chapter 17. Beyond the Trenches. The revelation that General Dubois was Madeline's uncle stunned Genevieve and the others. It explained Madeline's conflicted loyalties, her desperate attempts to protect both her family and Captain Moreau's legacy. It also shed new light on the conspiracy, revealing a web of familial ties and personal vendettas that had fueled the conflict. With General Dubois apprehended and the medallion's immediate threat neutralized, they returned to Anya and her people in the hidden sanctuary. They shared their story, recounting the events at the chateau, the general's madness, and Madeline's unexpected connection to him. Anya listened intently, her wise eyes filled with understanding and compassion. "The war has twisted many hearts," she said. "It has turned families against each other, friends into enemies. But it is not too late to heal, to forgive, to rebuild." They knew that the war was far from over. The larger conflict, the deep-seated hatreds and rivalries that had fueled it, still raged on. But they had won a significant victory, preventing a catastrophic escalation and planting the seeds of hope for a better future. They decided to continue their work, using the medallion's power to promote empathy and understanding, to disrupt the patterns of violence and aggression that plagued the world. They worked with Anya and her people, expanding their network of healers and protectors, reaching out to those who were disillusioned by the war, those who longed for peace. They focused their efforts on the front lines, sending out waves of compassion to the soldiers, encouraging them to lay down their arms, to see each other not as enemies, but as fellow human beings. They also worked to heal the wounded, both physically and emotionally, helping them to recover from the trauma of war. Their efforts were not always successful. They faced resistance, skepticism, and outright hostility from those who were still committed to the conflict. But they persevered, driven by their unwavering belief in the power of the medallion, by their shared commitment to peace. Slowly but surely, they began to see results. Soldiers started to desert, refusing to fight. Civilians began to organize protests, demanding an end to the war. Even some military leaders, disillusioned by the senseless slaughter, began to question the purpose of the conflict. The tide was turning. The momentum was shifting. The seeds of peace were beginning to sprout, fragile but tenacious, amidst the ruins of war. Genevieve, despite her age and the hardships she had endured, found a renewed sense of purpose in her work. She became a symbol of hope, a beacon of light in the darkness, inspiring others to join their cause. Lieutenant Dubois, freed from the shadow of his namesake, dedicated himself to rebuilding the French military, transforming it from an instrument of war into a force for peace. He worked to dismantle the corrupt networks that had allowed General Dubois to rise to power, and he championed a new vision of leadership based on compassion, integrity, and respect for human life. Father Michel, his faith restored, returned to his ministry, offering comfort and solace to those who were suffering. He used his knowledge of ancient wisdom and spiritual traditions to promote healing and reconciliation, helping people to overcome the trauma of war and rebuild their lives. Madeleine, finally free from the burden of her past betrayal, dedicated herself to caring for the wounded and the displaced. She used her medical skills and her newfound understanding of the medallion's power to heal both physical and emotional wounds, helping people to find hope and resilience amidst the devastation. As the war gradually wound down, they began to focus on the long-term task of rebuilding, of creating a lasting peace. They worked to establish schools, hospitals, and community centers, providing education, healthcare, and support for those who had been affected by the conflict. They also worked to promote dialogue and understanding between different groups, fostering reconciliation and forgiveness. They organized meetings, workshops, and cultural exchanges, bringing people together to share their stories, to learn from each other, and to build bridges of trust. Their efforts were not limited to France. They reached out to other countries, sharing their knowledge and their experience, helping others to establish similar initiatives for peace and reconciliation. The medallion, once a symbol of fear and potential destruction, became a symbol of hope, a catalyst for change, a testament to the power of compassion and the enduring human spirit. Genevieve knew their work would not be easy. The road to a world without war was long and arduous, filled with obstacles and challenges. But she was not alone. She had her companions. She had the memory of a brave captain and the support of many. Now. And she had the medallion. She smiled and watched the sunrise with the others, knowing that the next day would bring new challenges, but also new hope. She was not alone. They knew, together, they would face any challenge, as long as they kept faith in each other. Chapter 18. A Promise Rekindled. Years passed. The Great War, with its unprecedented scale of destruction and loss, finally came to an end. The armistice was signed, the guns fell silent, and the world began the long, arduous process of healing and rebuilding. Genevieve, Father Michel, Madeleine, and Lieutenant Dubois, their bond forged in the crucible of conflict, continued their work, tirelessly, selflessly. They had become a symbol of hope, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a living embodiment of Captain Moreau's dream of a world without war. Their sanctuary, the hidden valley where Anya and her people had first amplified the medallion's power, became a center for peace and reconciliation. People from all walks of life, from all corners of the war-torn world, came to seek healing, guidance, and inspiration. The valley, once a secret refuge, became a beacon of light, drawing those who longed for a better future. Genevieve, despite her advancing years, remained the heart and soul of their movement. Her wisdom, her compassion, her unwavering faith in the power of the medallion inspired countless others to join their cause. She became known as Mere Genevieve, Mother Genevieve, a title bestowed upon her by those whose lives she had touched, whose hearts she had healed. Lieutenant Dubois, now a respected leader in the newly reformed French military, worked tirelessly to dismantle the old structures of power and corruption, to build a new army based on principles of peace, justice, and respect for human rights. He became a champion of disarmament, advocating for a world where conflicts would be resolved through diplomacy and dialogue, not through violence and bloodshed. Father Michel, his faith renewed and strengthened by his experiences, returned to his parish, but his ministry extended far beyond the walls of his church. He became a spiritual guide for the movement, offering comfort, solace, and wisdom to those who were struggling to make sense of the war's aftermath, to find meaning in their suffering, to rebuild their lives. Madeleine, freed from the burden of her past, dedicated her life to healing the wounds of war, both physical and emotional. She established a network of clinics and hospitals, providing care for the injured, the traumatized, the displaced. She became a pioneer in the field of trauma recovery, developing innovative therapies that combined traditional medicine with the subtle energies of the medallion. As the years passed, the scars of war began to fade, slowly but surely. The battlefields were transformed into fields of wildflowers, the trenches filled in, the bombed-out villages rebuilt. The memories of loss and suffering remained, etched in the hearts and minds of those who had lived through the conflict, but they were gradually replaced by a sense of hope, of resilience, of determination to build a better future. One spring morning, Genevieve, now well into her 70s, found herself standing on the hilltop overlooking the sanctuary, the same spot where they had first used the medallion to send out their call for help, so many years ago. The sun was rising, casting a golden glow across the valley, bathing the landscape in a warm, ethereal light. She held the medallion in her hand, its familiar warmth a constant reassurance. She closed her eyes, feeling the gentle pulse of its energy, the connection to the earth, to the sky, to the universe. She remembered Captain Moreau, his vision, his sacrifice, his dream of a world without war. She thought of all the people whose lives had been touched by the medallion, by their work, by their shared commitment to peace. She thought of the soldiers who had laid down their arms, the families who had been reunited, the communities that had been rebuilt. She felt a deep sense of gratitude, of fulfillment, of peace. She had lived a long and full life, a life marked by both sorrow and joy, by both loss and love. She had witnessed the worst of humanity, but she had also witnessed the best. She had seen the power of hatred, but she had also seen the power of compassion. As she stood there, bathed in the golden light of the rising sun, she heard a familiar voice.
Mia Genevieve.
She turned and saw Lieutenant Dubois, now a distinguished-looking man in his late 40s, approaching her, his face etched with a mixture of respect and affection.
Jacques, she said, smiling.
It's good to see you. And you, Mere Genevieve, he replied, returning her smile. You look radiant. They stood in silence for a moment, gazing out at the valley, at the sanctuary, at the world that they had helped to heal. It's beautiful, isn't it? Jacques said, his voice filled with awe. Yes, Genevieve replied. It is. But it's not just the beauty of the landscape. It's the beauty of the human spirit, the beauty of what we can achieve when we work together, when we believe in the power of love, of compassion. Jacques nodded, his eyes filled with understanding. Captain Moreau would be proud, he said. I hope so, Genevieve said, her voice trembling slightly. I hope we've honored his memory, his legacy. You have, Mere Genevieve, Jacques assured her. You have. You've shown the world that peace is possible, that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope. He paused, then took a deep breath. There's something I need to tell you, Mere Genevieve, he said, his voice hesitant. Something I've been meaning to tell you for a long time. Genevieve looked at him, her heart filled with a sense of anticipation. She knew, somehow, what he was going to say. I love Madeline, he said, his voice barely a whisper. I have for years. But I was afraid to tell her. Afraid of rejection. Afraid of complicating things. Genevieve smiled, her eyes twinkling. And? She prompted. And I finally told her, he said, his face breaking into a wide grin. Last night. And she said yes. Genevieve's heart overflowed with joy. She reached out and embraced Jacques, her tears mingling with his. I'm so happy for you both, she said, her voice choked with emotion. You deserve all the happiness in the world. As they stood there, embracing, a gentle breeze swept through the valley, carrying the scent of wildflowers and the sound of birdsong. The sun rose higher in the sky, bathing the world in its warm, golden light. A promise, made long ago in the trenches of a terrible war, had been rekindled, and a new chapter, filled with hope and love, had begun. Chapter 19. The Edge of Dawn. The news of Jacques and Madeleine's engagement spread quickly through the sanctuary, bringing a wave of joy and celebration. It was a testament to the power of love to blossom even amidst the scars of war, a symbol of hope for a brighter future. Genevieve, watching them together, felt a deep sense of peace and fulfillment. She had witnessed their individual journeys, their struggles, their growth, and their ultimate union. It was a reminder that even in the darkest of times, love could prevail, that healing was possible, that new beginnings could emerge from the ashes of destruction. The wedding was held in the heart of the sanctuary, beneath the ancient standing stones where they had first amplified the medallion's power. It was a simple but beautiful ceremony, attended by the entire community, a gathering of people from all walks of life, united by their shared commitment to peace and their love for Jacques and Madeleine. Father Michel, his voice filled with emotion, officiated the ceremony, his words echoing through the valley, carrying a message of hope, of forgiveness, of reconciliation. Anya and her people performed ancient rituals, invoking the blessings of the earth, the sky, and the spirits of their ancestors. Genevieve, standing beside the couple, felt a surge of pride and gratitude. She had played a part in bringing them together, in guiding them towards their destiny. She had witnessed the transformative power of love, its ability to heal wounds, to bridge divides, to create a sense of belonging and connection. As Jacques and Madeleine exchanged their vows, their eyes locked in a gaze of unwavering love and commitment, Genevieve felt a pang of longing, a memory of her own beloved Pierre, lost to the war so many years ago. But it was not a feeling of sadness, but rather a feeling of bittersweet joy, a recognition that love, in all its forms, was the most powerful force in the universe. After the ceremony, the community gathered for a feast, a celebration of life, of love, of hope. There was music, dancing, laughter, and tears of joy. The sanctuary, once a refuge from the ravages of war, had become a haven of peace, a testament to the power of human resilience, of human connection, of human love. As the day drew to a close, Genevieve found herself sitting alone by the stream, the gentle murmur of the water a soothing balm to her soul. She held the medallion in her hand, its familiar warmth a constant reminder of her journey, of her purpose, of her connection to Captain Moreau's legacy. She thought of all that they had accomplished, of the lives they had touched, of the changes they had brought about in the world. They had not eradicated war completely, they had not created a utopia, but they had made a difference. They had planted the seeds of peace, they had nurtured the flames of hope, they had shown the world that a better future was possible. As she sat there, contemplating the past and the future, she felt a presence beside her. She turned and saw Anya, her wise eyes filled with understanding and compassion. You are weary, Mere Genevieve, Anya said, her voice gentle. Genevieve nodded, a faint smile gracing her lips. Yes, she admitted. I am. But it is a good kind of weariness. a weariness that comes from a life well lived, a purpose fulfilled. Anya sat down beside her, their shoulders touching. You have done much, Mere Genevieve, she said. You have honored Captain Moreau's memory. You have fulfilled his dream. You have inspired countless others to follow your example. We have done it together, Anya, Genevieve corrected. It was not my work alone. It was the work of many, united by a shared vision, a shared commitment to peace. True, Anya agreed. But you were the catalyst, Mere Genevieve. You were the one who brought us together, who guided us, who showed us the way. They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the gentle murmur of the stream, the rustling of the leaves in the trees, the distant sounds of celebration. What now, Anya? Genevieve asked, her voice filled with a mixture of curiosity and anticipation.
What is the next chapter?
Anya smiled, her eyes twinkling. The next chapter is unwritten, Mere Genevieve, she said. It is up to us to write it, to shape it, to create it. The future is not predetermined. It is not fixed. It is a tapestry woven from the threads of our choices, our actions, our intentions. And the medallion? Genevieve asked, holding it up, its faint glow reflecting in her eyes. What is its role in the future? Anya's expression became serious. The medallion is a tool, Mere Genevieve, she said. A powerful tool, but a tool nonetheless. It can be used for good or for evil, for healing or for destruction. Its power depends on the intention of the wielder, on the heart of the one who holds it. I understand, Genevieve said, nodding. It is not the medallion itself that matters, but the way we use it, the purpose we serve. Exactly, Anya agreed. And that is why, Mere Genevieve, it is time for you to pass it on. Genevieve's eyes widened in surprise.
Pass it on?
She repeated. To whom? Anya smiled, her gaze shifting towards the celebration, towards the happy couple, Jacques and Madeleine. To the next generation, Mere Genevieve, she said. To those who will carry on the work, who will continue to strive for peace, who will build a better future for all. Genevieve understood. It was time. She had played her part. She had fulfilled her purpose. Now it was time for others to take up the mantle, to carry the torch, to continue the journey. She looked at the medallion in her hand, feeling a pang of sadness, a sense of letting go. But it was not a sadness of loss, but rather a sadness of transition, of passing on a precious legacy to those who would cherish it, who would use it wisely, who would honor its power. She knew who the next guardian should be. The two of them. Together. She stood up, her old bones creaking, but her spirit strong and resolute. She walked towards the celebration, towards Jacques and Madeleine, the medallion held high, its faint glow illuminating her path. The next chapter was about to be written, a chapter filled with hope, with love, with the promise of a new dawn.
It was time.
She had to pass the torch. Chapter 20. The Reckoning of Hearts. Genevieve approached Jacques and Madeleine, the medallion held aloft, its gentle glow casting a soft, ethereal light on their faces. The sounds of celebration faded into the background as all eyes turned towards her, sensing the significance of the moment. Jacques, Madeleine, Genevieve said, her voice clear and strong, despite the tremor of emotion that ran through her. The time has come for me to pass on the medallion, to entrust it to your care. The couple looked at her, their eyes wide with surprise and a mixture of awe and trepidation. They understood the weight of the responsibility, the legacy they were being asked to inherit. Mere Genevieve, Jacques began, his voice hesitant. We are honored, but are you sure?
We are not worthy.
You are worthy, Genevieve assured him, her gaze unwavering. You have proven yourselves time and again. You have shown courage, compassion, and unwavering commitment to peace. You are the future, the hope of the next generation. She turned to Madeleine, her eyes filled with warmth and affection. Madeleine, you have overcome so much. You have healed so many wounds, both physical and emotional. You have a deep understanding of the medallion's power, of its potential for both good and evil. You will use it wisely, I know. Madeleine, tears welling up in her eyes, nodded. I will do my best, Mere Genevieve, she said, her voice trembling. I will honor Captain Moreau's memory. I will strive to fulfill his dream. Genevieve placed the medallion in Madeline's hand, her touch lingering for a moment, transferring not just the physical object, but also the weight of responsibility, the legacy of hope, the power of compassion. The medallion is not just a tool, Genevieve said, her voice filled with wisdom. It is a symbol of hope, of healing, of connection. It is a reminder that we are all interconnected, that we all have the power to make a difference, to create a better world. She looked at both of them, her gaze encompassing the entire community gathered around them. The future is not predetermined, she said. It is not fixed. It is up to us to create it, to shape it, to make it what we want it to be. We must choose love over hate, compassion over indifference, peace over war. She paused, her eyes sweeping across the faces of those who had gathered, their expressions a mixture of hope, gratitude, and determination. The war may be over, she said, but the battle for peace continues. It is a battle that must be fought every day, in our hearts, in our minds, in our actions. We must never give up. We must never lose hope. We must never stop striving for a better future. Her words resonated through the sanctuary, echoing through the valley, carrying a message of hope and inspiration to all who heard them. The community responded with a chorus of affirmation, their voices united in a shared commitment to peace, to justice, to a world without war. As the celebration continued, Genevieve quietly slipped away, leaving the younger generation to carry on the work, to build the future they had dreamed of. She walked towards the stream, the same spot where she had sat with Anya, where she had realized it was time to pass on the medallion. She sat down on the bank, the gentle murmur of the water a soothing balm to her soul. She closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of the setting sun on her face, the cool breeze on her skin. She felt a deep sense of peace, of fulfillment, of gratitude. She had lived a long and full life, a life marked by both sorrow and joy, by both loss and love. She had witnessed the worst of humanity, but she had also witnessed the best. She had seen the power of hatred, but she had also seen the power of compassion. She had played her part. She had fulfilled her purpose. She had honored Captain Moreau's memory. She had helped to heal the wounds of war. She had inspired countless others to join the cause of peace. As she sat there, contemplating her life, her legacy, she felt a presence beside her. She opened her eyes and saw Father Michel, his face etched with the wisdom of age, his eyes filled with a gentle understanding. "You are at peace, Mère Genevieve," he said, his voice soft. Genevieve nodded, a faint smile gracing her lips. "Yes, Father," she replied. "I am. I have done what I could. Now it is up to the next generation." They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the gentle murmur of the stream, the rustling of the leaves in the trees, the distant sounds of celebration. "You have been a true inspiration, Mère Genevieve," Father Michel said, his voice filled with admiration. "You have shown us the way, you have guided us, you have given us hope." "We have done it together, Father," Genevieve corrected. "It was not my work alone. It was the work of many, united by a shared vision, a shared commitment to peace." "True," Father Michel agreed. "But you were the heart of it all, Mère Genevieve. You were the one who brought us together, who kept us going, who never lost faith." They fell silent again, each lost in their own thoughts, their own memories. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange, purple, and red. Genevieve felt a chill, a sense of finality. She knew, somehow, that her time was drawing to a close. She had lived a long and full life, and she was ready to let go, to embrace the peace that awaited her. She looked at Father Michel, her eyes filled with love and gratitude. "Thank you, Father," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "For everything." Father Michel smiled, his eyes twinkling. "Thank you, Mère Genevieve," he replied, "for showing us the true meaning of love, of compassion, of peace." Genevieve closed her eyes, a peaceful smile on her lips. She took a deep breath, and then she was gone. Father Michel, his heart filled with both sorrow and joy, gently closed her eyes. He knew that she was at peace, that she had returned to the source from which she came. He stood up, his old bones creaking, but his spirit strong and resolute. He looked towards the celebration, towards the younger generation, their faces illuminated by the light of the rising moon. He knew that Genevieve's legacy would live on, that her spirit would continue to inspire, to guide, to heal. The battle for peace was far from over, but the torch had been passed, the hope remained, and the future was in good hands. He looked up at the sky and whispered, "Rest well, old friend. Your work is done."
Epilogue.
The years that followed Genevieve's passing saw the sanctuary flourish, becoming a beacon of hope and healing for a world still grappling with the aftermath of the Great War. Jacques and Madeleine, guided by the medallion and Genevieve's teachings, led the community with wisdom, compassion, and unwavering dedication. They expanded the sanctuary's reach, establishing centers for peace and reconciliation in various parts of the world, fostering dialogue and understanding between different cultures and nations. They trained a new generation of healers, protectors, and peacemakers, ensuring that Captain Moreau's legacy and Genevieve's spirit would live on. The medallion, no longer a secret weapon, became a symbol of unity, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope could prevail, that healing was possible, that love could conquer all. It was passed down through generations, entrusted to those who demonstrated a deep commitment to peace, a profound understanding of its power, and a willingness to use it for the greater good. Father Michel lived to a ripe old age, witnessing the fruits of their labor, seeing the world gradually heal, slowly but surely, from the ravages of war. He often visited Genevieve's resting place by the stream, sharing stories and seeking guidance from her spirit, which he felt was always present, watching over them, guiding them. Lieutenant Dubois, fulfilling his promise, reformed the French military, transforming it into a force for peace and stability, not only within France, but also in international collaborations. He championed disarmament and diplomacy, advocating for a world where conflicts would be resolved through dialogue and understanding, not through violence and bloodshed. Madeleine, drawing upon her own experiences and her deep connection to the medallion, became a renowned healer, developing innovative therapies that combined traditional medicine with the subtle energies of the artifact. She traveled the world, sharing her knowledge and skills, helping countless individuals to overcome trauma, to find peace, to rediscover their inner strength. The world did not become a utopia. Conflicts still arose, tensions still flared, and human nature remained a complex tapestry of both light and shadow. But the sanctuary and the network of peace centers it inspired served as a constant reminder that another way was possible, that peace was not just a dream, but a tangible goal, achievable through dedication, compassion, and unwavering commitment. The Standing Stones, where Genevieve had first amplified the medallion's power, became a place of pilgrimage, a destination for those seeking inspiration, guidance, and a connection to the spirit of peace that permeated the valley. People from all walks of life, from all corners of the globe, came to pay their respects to Mère Genevieve, to honor her legacy, and to renew their own commitment to building a better world. And so, the story of Genevieve Lefebvre, the enchanted medallion, and the unlikely group of heroes who fought for peace amidst the horrors of war, became a legend, a tale whispered around campfires, shared in classrooms, and passed down through generations. It was a story of courage, compassion, and resilience, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope could blossom, love could conquer, and peace could prevail. The medallion's gentle glow, a symbol of that enduring hope, continued to shine, a beacon in the night, guiding humanity towards a brighter future, a future where the reckoning of hearts would finally lead to a world without war. A world she had helped to build, one act of kindness, one moment of bravery, at a time. And though she was gone, her light, like the medallion's, would never fade. The end.